On this episode of Hit the Books Podcast, we're talking about more Lord of the Rings. Stay tuned! Hello and welcome to another episode of Hit the Books Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Holcomb.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Dan the Man Maloney.
Hooray. We have two guest hosts on this episode of Hit the Books Podcast, both Nick Prime, Nick Marlatt, and Emery Saunders are both out. One just got back from Florida on a big family vacation, so congrats, Nick. That must have been fun. But I'm sure he's sunburnt in, Florida. And then Emery is attending a recital for his daughter. So props, humble brag, good parent, good job. I, meanwhile, am abandoning my my little newborn baby up in the second level. So yeah, not doing as good.
Family comes first.
For some of us.
Hey, my brother's here. He's family, kind of. Right?
It counts.
He doesn't admit it, but, that's a whole nother issue.
Not an issue for me.
Taking care of your newborn, taking care of your brother. Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. So, as always, you can reach out to us at HTBVids on Twitter, at facebook.com/hitthebooks, at HitTheBooksVids, VIDS, at gmail.com. And of course, you can go to our website, htbvids.com, where you can find our lists of previous variants and episodes and all that good stuff. As always, be sure to check out Those Natural Ones on the YouTube channel. They are no longer streaming live on the Twitch channel, though you can still go look up their old episodes. And, of course, use your Prime membership to support them. If you're not using it for anything else, they would very much appreciate a little bit of financial support for their Twitch channel. It comes out, I think they get like $1.20 or something for every one. And the painful part is you got to renew it once a month, which is, I don't know why it's still that way. Why can't you just set it and forget it if you're a Prime member? But I guess they don't want you to because they want to keep that money in their pockets. So I get it. Beyond that, do you guys got anything else you want to promote before we really get into it?
Nothing for me.
All right. Well, gentlemen, please let me know. What have you been up to? Watching, reading, listening to, playing, perhaps?
Well, I finished watching Chainsaw Man just a couple weeks ago. I heard all about it. I saw a lot of Chainsaw Man cosplay at GalaxyCon and thought it was the creepiest thing I'd ever seen. There was actually a person walking around who had a chainsaw for a face, which, when I heard the title Chainsaw Man, I don't think it clicked for me just how literal a title that was going to be. The man had a chainsaw for a face. So anyway, I got curious. I turned on the anime. The first episode is amazing. It hooked me. I watched all 12 episodes very quickly. And I wanted more, so I read the manga, volumes 1 through 10, which you can rent from the Columbus Metropolitan Library for free, I'm just saying. And it was also awesome. It's actually the first manga I've ever read in my life, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Babby's first manga.
More. That's right.
Look at that.
It's a big moment for me.
Proud of you.
Pretty crazy. I did not realize that you can read a manga pretty much in 2 hours, a whole volume, no problem.
Yeah.
Probably less.
Goes quick.
I didn't know it was that easy. If I knew it was that easy, I would have read more. But thoroughly enjoyed that. So looking forward to the next season. My favorite character that I encountered in these 10 volumes will be the major focus of season 2 based on how season 1 ended. No spoilers. So that was pretty great. I'm a big Chainsaw Man fan. Dan. Now. Besides that, I think I mentioned I read Fire and Blood not that long ago. I probably mentioned that the last time I was on
Probably,
here,
but
right?
who cares?
But yeah, that was great. Sometimes dry, sometimes ridiculous, sometimes degenerate, as always with George R. R. Martin. I don't know what's wrong with that guy, but he has issues.
He certainly has issues. The first and foremost being that he hasn't finished his goddamn series. And we'll talk about it in the news. He's still doing other things.
Crazy.
He's going to die. I'm convinced there's no way this man is going to live long enough in his current state of health to finish those books. So all the people that really wanted those books, sorry. That HBO ending is what you got. It's all you'll ever get.
Or you could just watch seasons 1 through 4 and make up your own ending, Mass Effect 3 style.
Well, I mean, if the franchise lives long enough, I'm sure Amazon will throw $1 billion to do that. So we will see. Or one of these other streaming apps.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's way too many of now.
Way too many. Might as well just buy cable at this point. But on a different streaming app that I have, and I have many, I also watched an anime I mentioned before we started recording called Licorice Recoil. I'm actually not even sure if I'm saying that right. It's kind of hard to translate to English. Anyway, Licorice Recoil I encountered because I was voting on the Crunchyroll Anime Awards, and I found that it was nominated for Anime of the Year, and I had never heard of it before. And I've heard no online chatter in the various weeb circles I inhabit about this anime, and yet somehow it was an award nominee. So, once again, curiosity took hold, and I watched it, and I loved it. And I watched it all the way through also very quickly. I don't think I liked it quite as much as Chainsaw Man, but I liked it for quite different reasons. So it's great. And not a lot of people are talking about it. I don't think a lot of people have seen it. So if you like anime and you need something to watch and you want something that's a good 12, 13 episodes, I think it's 13 episodes, go ahead and flip on Licorice Recoil. It is great stuff.
Great. Yeah, I keep seeing these lists pop up. I don't subscribe to them. I was telling you about them before the show, but I get these these weekly rankings that just pop up in my Facebook feed, and they're basically ranking like what was the most popular episode as far as ratings in the world of anime, and the new Bleach series tends to take the top spot almost every week, and then right under it is usually Chainsaw Man, and then Licorice Recoil is usually like 4 or 5, and then that really popular Spy series,
Spy Family,
yep, that one is also always like number 3, number 2, somewhere in there. So apparently there's a lot of good stuff going on. I need to get around to the Bleach stuff because I'm a big Bleach fan. However, that series did not end particularly well because they just ran out of material and the manga was still going, and they just, instead of continuing or filling with excessive filler episodes, they had a lot, but they eventually just got too long in the tooth. They just gave up on it. They're just like, screw it. Kind of the Inuyasha thing, where they took Inuyasha for, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 episodes, something like that. And finally, they just realized we're never going to get to the ending. So let's just end the series. And then years later, they made a final season for it and just called it Inuyasha the Final Season. A standalone series. Made by a completely different studio. So that's how you got your ending. The world of anime is strange.
It is. And on the subject of Spy Family, I will say that my unofficial study, which is to say watching cosplayers at GalaxyCon, which I attended in December, I think that Spy Family was probably second only to My Hero Academia in the number of cosplayers I saw.
I believe it.
Paying tribute to Spy Family. Spy Family is more of a, even though it is a spy show, it kind of has the feel of a slice of life, and it's more of a comedy. So if you want something a little more serious and heavy, don't watch it. If you want something that'll pass an afternoon and you're feeling like something really light and easy, it is certainly delightful. So Spy Family is pretty good stuff too. And the last thing I've been up to last night, I did finally break down and watch Megan. I think I mentioned in our group chat.
Yeah.
Horror, comedy, and it works on both fronts, which is really interesting. I've not watched a ton of horror movies, so I can't really comment on how often that is done in that way, but I know that I personally have not seen horror and comedy come together so effectively in that way. I mean, they brought in Ronnie Chang, the guy from Shang-Chi that was like, oh, English, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I know that, like that guy.
Yeah. And
he was great comic relief to the point that I felt like I was watching a comedy movie for probably 30 minutes. But when it was time to get creepy, it got creepy. And it did get pretty ridiculous at parts. I think it was meant to be ridiculous. So I don't think it was like that they stumbled into it with poor filmmaking by any stretch. But thoroughly enjoyable watch. So if you like horror or comedy or horror comedy, watch Megan. 2 thumbs up.
Yep, you're not the first person to recommend that movie, so must be doing something right. How about you, Nick? What have you been up to?
Well, it's only been like 2 or 3 weeks since it, well, maybe a bit longer.
Yeah, you were, well, yeah, it was definitely longer because we missed a week. So
I'm trying
probably about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
3 or 4.
We're going to talk about this later, but Resident Evil 4 Remake is coming out, and I used the opportunity to go back and replay all the games again. I went back and beat Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, the original PlayStation 1 games, not the remakes. My
Nice.
girlfriend ended up watching the whole time, and she really likes them now. She thinks it's really cool. She hates 7 and 8 now because 7 and 8, it's like 1, 2, and 3, they're very much sci-fi, and 7 and 8 is like vampires and werewolves and all this shit, and it's just like, I see why it's dumb.
Yeah, I can't think of another franchise that went in so many random directions throughout its existence. You know, it started off as this kind of slow, tanky, you know, almost psychological zombie-ish thriller, you know, horror game, and then gradually became like this ridiculous, over-the-top, almost like Gears of War action game, like comically stupid action game. And then once those had failed long enough, they went to this new route with I think 7 was the first one they tried, the new route where it's like more of a horror, like a first person
They made it back to
horror.
Blue Haunted House.
They added like VR elements, so you could do it in VR if you wanted to. And then they continued that kind of with the newest one, but it's like less of like a jump scare horror game and more of an action game again, like a vampire goofy action game. So they're all over the place, and I don't know what the common theme really is between all of them, other than there's, you know, generic horror elements in each one.
I feel like, again, going back and playing the originals, it made me realize that the originals were so much more grounded in, like, it's science fiction, it's inspired, right? You'd see inspirations from like Terminator 2, from Aliens, like you have very like 80s and 90s kind of like thematic stuff, like Japanese take on Western movies and themes, but I don't know, it just made me appreciate them a lot more compared to what we have now. So I've been playing that, watched Paranormal Activity, a few of the movies. I'm not a big fan of found footage movies. I really don't like Blair Witch Project because I feel like the problem with found footage movies in general is either they're supposed to convey that this is something real, in which case nothing really happens and they're kind of boring, or if it's something does happen, it looks so fake and over the top that you can't. Because there's no way this is like ever convincing you that it's real. So I watched 3 and 4 because I've seen 1 and 2. Didn't really like 3, hated 4, but then I watched Paranormal Activity 2 Tokyo Nights, which is a Japanese-made spin-off of Paranormal Activity.
Huh.
And I really liked it.
Wow. Yeah. My Paranormal Activity doesn't go beyond the first movie. I saw the first movie in theaters, and then I watched it later, and like held up pretty good. I liked it. You know, I'm into ghost stuff, so it worked for me. But then, like, every time they make sequels out of this stuff, they just start making it real dumb and over-explaining everything. Like, half the fun is, like, the mystery. Like, you don't know what it is, you know, this weird phenomenon you can't tackle or address in any way. Like, I like that because it makes it way scarier to me when it's something unknown. And all these theories are like, oh, it's linked to this cult that did this and that in the past and murdered so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. I don't need it all spelled out for me. just let it be vague.
It's like when you had all those like origin stories for like Texas Chainsaw Massacre became like a whole like, we need to know how the guy got a shotgun and how he got his chainsaw. I really don't.
Really? Yeah. It's a hillbilly that kills people. And
that's what makes it scary.
What more do you need?
Not knowing, like, is his motivation, like, actually, like, oh, it was abused as a kid. It's like, okay, how many horror villains need that?
Yeah, and I mean, it goes to other places, like, even, like, the Joker, who I got on the wall over there, like, I don't like it when they over-explain who the Joker is. Like, oh, we're going to say he's this guy that killed Bruce's parents when he was a kid. Or, oh, we're going to say he's, you know, this goofy robber who wore a red hood and, you know, fell in a vat of chemicals, blah, blah, blah. Those are always the worst versions of the Joker. The ones that I think are, like, genuinely terrifying are the ones that you don't really know the origins. And I think like Dark Knight, for example, captured that perfectly, because every time he'd tell us his origin story, it'd be something different. It was always a different story for what his origin was and why he had his scars and everything else. Because, maybe he doesn't know. But the vagueness makes it even more terrifying, because you have no idea where this fucking guy came from. He's just a fucking murderous lunatic that just seemingly almost supernaturally just came out of the woodwork one day and just started wreaking havoc. So I always like that kind of take on horror characters, villains, etc. Like, it doesn't work for everybody, but when it does work, I don't fuck with it. That's my personal feeling. But
I agree. I think origin stories can work, but they have to be like either do something really original with it, like the new Joker movie, or do something that like actually expands upon the lore in a way that's interesting and nuanced, not just so how did that, there needs to be more to it.
Yeah, I mean, you only got to look to Star Wars. Like, if they hadn't told the origin stories of some of these characters, they probably would have been way better off.
There's been some stuff where they could do better.
Yeah.
The other thing I beat I started playing Last of Us because I never played it, and the show's coming out, and I was like, hey, another opportunity to catch up on something.
Good choice.
I played Last of Us 1 and its DLC because I had it on the PS4 version.
Yeah.
I think that the gameplay is all right, but the story is fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. I love it so much. I haven't watched the show yet, but everybody tells me good things. Nobody that's played the game has watched the show that I know of. So that's the opinion I'm really curious about.
I'm scared because I have a friend who beat the game, who loves the first game especially, who says no. And I'm trying not to hear any. I told him, don't say anything. I want to go in and get my own opinion. But I think what's
going to happen is there's going to be this weird divisiveness, whichever one you experience first, that's going to be the one you prefer and favor, and it's just not going to be quite right in either direction. I get the feeling this is going to be one of those franchises.
I hope it holds up, honestly. But having beaten the first game, I think the story is very well done. I like it way more than The Walking Dead, even, which I think meanders way too much versus this one. I think that the ending is very. I love a game where you don't really know if you there's no good guy, bad guy. It's you could make an argument for both.
Well, but like we were saying, they respect your intelligence. They leave things kind of vague. They don't give everybody's origin story. Like, the only origin story you really get is Joel through this. It's basically just the origin of what's happening in the world more than it's his origin story, because you get a whole 20 years of his life that you totally miss. Right. So
you get bits and pieces. I liked that.
They respect your intelligence enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
It's nice when you're able to fill in the blanks yourself instead of it having been broken down and chewed up for you.
Yeah.
I like the DLC as well, honestly.
Yeah, it was solid.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Ellie's backstory. And then I started playing Last of Us 2.
Last of Us 2 is very decisive.
And I don't want to get into it since this is the first part. And honestly, I would like to beat the game. I'm about 4 hours in for reference. So I think the game's 20, 25 hours. So maybe about a quarter-ish. And I think the setup is really interesting. I think what they did to Ellie's character is well written, but horribly paced. I think that they took her relationship with Dina and shoved all of the development that would make sense over the course of a game into the first 45 minutes. And I can see why people think that it's really pandery and look, see, isn't this good?
Yeah.
It feels very forced, and it's impossible not to notice it.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't played it yet. The quality's there for sure, especially in the performances, but there's some plot choices that I don't think were very good. I think they do beat you over the head with some stuff, whereas the first game respected your intelligence enough for you to figure it out on your own.
The first game was paced, and again, I took a week in between just to process it and give myself time. I played a few hours every day. I didn't rush anything. I took my time with it.
Yeah.
Because it's a story, right? You want to sit with it, let it kind of affect you. I think that the first one has an infinitely better opening, infinitely better pacing, and overall, I think the second one, the setup so far, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the setup, the motivation for what seems to be the main what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think is brilliant. I don't have a problem with the risks they took in terms of like putting you in that position as that character. I just think that when it comes to character development, and you probably know what I'm talking about if you play the game, there are way better ways to do that don't make you feel like you're forced into like, no, we're going to tell you this story. It's like, okay, but this is kind of like, or am I playing a zombie drama game or am I playing, something else, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's certainly aspects to all that.
But yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I'm trying to remember what else. Watched Underworld. Really liked it.
Great.
From last time we were
Right.
talking about it.
See, this man does his homework. I gave him assignments. He completed them. I'm proud of you.
That's how you get rid of your backlog. You ask your friends to recommend you good shit.
A+. You get a gold star this week.
And last thing I want to mention is, Chris, you said you beat Horizon Zero Dawn, the first one.
Yep.
I ordered it.
And
so
the DLC, Frozen Wilds.
And the DLC. That's the complete edition, right? It should
Yeah,
be.
yeah. It's all included. Yep.
I bought the complete edition of that because it was fairly cheap and
yeah, you probably could have gotten it for free if you wanted to.
Well,
yeah.
I like collecting physical games. I like.
Oh, okay, great.
I still do the digital, like all the.
I still got the OG one wrapped in plastic if you want it. Doesn't have the DLC, but it's there.
The code's probably expired.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
That's what you do when you got good friends who know good games and good shit. Ask them for recommendations and do it. Don't be sad, be like watching the same movie over and over again. There's good stuff out there. Anyway, yeah. Chris, what about you? What was your?
Well, I feel it's probably worth mentioning for Emery's sake that we're continuing to do our D&D adventure that he brought me into for Babby's First. Again, I mentioned this with Emery last week, so if you're watching, listening, you should have already seen and heard that one. I think it's finishing rendering right now. But at first, it was kind of tedious. It was a little overwhelming, especially, and we're still in that kind of early stage where I'm still kind of having to read every single thing and try to figure out what it actually means to the gameplay and the interactions with each other and how I can use it, manipulate it. But yeah, it's become something that I really look forward to. Between the podcast, editing, working my normal, daily job, coming home to a very young baby who can't do anything for himself, and then often not getting a lot of sleep because he wakes up throughout the night to be fed and stuff. I just haven't had a lot of time for myself in the mix there, and that's kind of the podcast is, when we're recording, is definitely one of those moments. But the setup of the podcast and the editing and the rendering and doing all the extra stuff around it is just really, it's like another full-time job, sometimes. But that being said, I'm really looking forward to every Monday, having fun with you guys. One of our fellow campaigners couldn't make it this week, but we still had some fun adventures. Killed a stupid number of bandits.
15?
14. We had 14 bandits attack us, and then you're right, a 15th, who is the leader, showed up, and they started running away, but only after we had killed 12 of them. So we just had a mountain of dead bodies just around us.
We're not going to resurrect these ones, though.
Yeah, we tried to ride some vultures in the previous episode. It's fun. I have the ability to basically stabilize things that we've killed and then heal them to revive them. We killed 4 giant vultures who had attacked us in the middle of the desert. I thought, well, there's a sandstorm coming on the horizon. Maybe if we hop on their backs, bring them back to life, they'll fly to shelter. And we'll just ride them to a nice, safe shelter. And then if we need to kill them, at the end, we'll just kill them there. Because they're already weak, right?
This is the paladin of the group, making these moral, complex choices.
Well, cleric. Yeah.
Paladin.
Even more holy. Yeah. But it's worth noting I'm a death cleric. So, my god's not so friendly all the time. Not necessarily evil, but, dead people are his thing. Or her thing. Who knows? But it didn't go well. Because Emery decided to be a spoilsport and ruin all our fun. We could have had a nice chocobo to ride all the way home, and instead we got attacked twice by 4 giant vultures who nearly killed us twice.
I will say, and this is a question for the audience to leave a comment. If you were murdered by someone, and then you were resurrected by that same person like 30 minutes later, and they were like, all right, you're going to perform some hard labor for me. Let's go. What will your reaction be?
Well, see, they have no idea what's going on. They're stupid chickens. Like we were on their back. They can't see us. They see a giant storm coming on the horizon. They know they got to go. Like, they can't hang around and fight some assholes. No. Emery says, no. This is not going to happen. You're going to fight these fucking birds again as your punishment. Lame.
Well, at the very least, riding vultures in a sandstorm would make a great death metal album.
It would.
Music video win.
Heavy metal. Yeah. So that was fun. We had fun this week, of course, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I watched some more of the Harley Quinn HBO show, which is still hilarious. It still holds up. I think they're in their 3rd season now. The show's great. Like, if you're even a fleeting, fringe DC comic fan, and you want to see like a hilarious take on the characters from the Batman universe, definitely watch this show. It's a lot of fun. If you're not, and you don't know these characters, and you don't know like the stereotypical takes on those characters, it might not be as funny to you, but there's still a lot of humor to be found. Art styles, you have to get used to it. I don't know if it's the streaming service quality or if it's just the way it was designed, but it's done in a way where all the backgrounds are like kind of blurry almost, and just not like they're not quite drawn in a way. I think they do it intentionally to make you focus on the characters themselves and the animation, but it annoys me. Like it annoys me. It makes me feel like my eyes are out of focus or something. And yeah, that's one very minor complaint I have, if I'm being real nitpicky, because it does pull me out of the experience sometimes. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I also got caught up on all the South Park specials on Paramount Plus, and the Beavis and Butthead movie, where they end up on this NASA program, and they end up falling into a black hole and jettisoned into the future, aka our time, because they were from the 90s.
I saw bits and pieces of that. I really liked what I saw.
Oh yeah, there are moments like I will say the South Park specials are way better. Like Matt and Trey are still just fucking geniuses at their craft. All these years later, I think they're on their 26th season. Is that right? They're still fucking killing it. The specials were brilliant.
I've never once in my life said episode 2 of season 26 was great about literally any shit.
It's ridiculous as I fall into a black hole myself here. But Beavis and Butthead, the movie on was it Paramount Plus? I think it's Paramount Plus, right? That movie is great. There is so much modern satire in that. Not, like I said, not quite to the degree of South Park, but still, Mike Judge still has it. Really funny. There are particular moments in the movie that I thought were like hysterically funny, where they go to a college campus in modern times and they go into a gender studies classroom. Holy shit. I was fucking dying. If you haven't seen it, I'll show you a clip before you guys leave. It's so funny. So highly recommend that one. I don't want to spoil any of the jokes or setups. There are some slow moments. I will say the pacing's not perfect. But if you love Beavis and Butthead, this is that to the nth degree. You're going to love it.
Speaking of Mike Judge still having it, where are we on the King of the Hill revival?
Hulu has bought it. So it's coming, but it's going to Hulu, which I don't know anybody who still has Hulu at this point.
No, I dropped Hulu quite some time ago because there was nothing worth watching that I could see.
I'm aware.
You are well aware. But I'm glad you're enjoying HBO.
I lost my piggyback.
I'm glad you're enjoying HBO, though.
Yeah. Let's see here. What else? I did some updates to the studio. It's still in progress, so it's not perfect. I'm going to basically tighten all this stuff a little bit so I can add a lot more to the wall so you have a little bit more visually. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Help us out a little bit there. It really helps out with the algorithms and helps us get to a point where maybe we can monetize a little bit and recoup some of the investment we've had in the show. But I've added some colored lights as opposed to the white lights we had previously. I'm going to rearrange this a little bit. I've added several more comics to the side with the frames. I'm probably going to do some updated instructional videos because the old ones are pretty low and rambling, like all the things I do. So you should be able to look forward to those in the very near future, and that will kind of tie into everything, so I can record episodes about how I'm updating the studio and then also provide some instructional stuff along the way. In the meantime, I'm still trying to decide what my next project to catch up on will be. I think I'm probably going to tackle Witcher 3 again. I think I'm pretty close to the end of the main story, and then I have the Blood and Wine DLC that I need to finish. I was waiting. Basically, it's one of those things where they baited me and they're like, hey, we're going to update this. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to give me a PS5 version, I'll just wait for the PS5 version to come out. And so that's when I tackled Horizon Zero Dawn, which I was surprised at how much I fell in love with that game. Really enjoyed it. Had a lot of great WoW moments, as we've discussed previously. Then I played the Frozen Wilds DLC. Really enjoyed it. Was surprised by how long it took to do all the story stuff in there, in the side quests. But yeah, great world, really interesting lore if you take the time to invest in it. Awesome gameplay, a lot of fun creative weapons, somewhat basic RPG elements, but not so basic that you don't enjoy when you do get that key upgrade to your character. It's a game, I think, from 2016, so it has aged a bit, but by all accounts, the sequel, Forbidden West, is really, really great. So I'm looking forward to that in the future. However, it was a lot of hours. I mean, I had to have spent between the DLC and the main game at least 100 hours playing that game from start to finish and doing all the extra stuff. So I'm a little bit horizoned out. I don't need any more Aloy right now, so I'm going to save that for a future time and place. But it is free right now if you got the higher tiers of PlayStation Plus. So if you're wanting to get that game and you have the higher tiers of PlayStation Plus, go ahead and add that to your library so you have it when you get the time to play it. So yeah, Witcher 3, most likely finish that one up. It's a big game, so it's probably going to take me another 100 hours.
You're not going to play 1 and 2?
I've already beaten those.
Oh.
Long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't start Witcher 3 because I want to beat 1 and 2. And
you don't have to.
I know.
I'm here to tell you the
1's hard to get into.
Yeah, they are making a remake of it that should be more approachable. No one knows when it's going to come out, so you'll probably be waiting a few years. But they haven't announced anything updated for Witcher 2, so like time's ticking. And quite honestly, the stories for 1 and 2 are basically just making up an excuse for why the end of the book series isn't the end of the book series. So I don't know if you've read the books.
I've read the first
Polish
2.
books.
I like them.
Yeah, I got them. I might be missing 1 or 2 now because I think my dog tore them up back in the day. But
dog ate your Witcher?
Ate my Witcher, for sure. But the books are great. I really love the books. If you're just looking for something new and unique in a, not English-focused fantasy environment, we got the Tolkiens, we got the Rowlings, and they've both kind of dominated fantasy for the longest time in recent history. If you want something a little different, a little Eastern European fantasy, go and pick up the Witcher titles. They're really good. They were printed out of order. This is the most frustrating part for anybody who's English speaking and wants to get invested. You have to look up the order of the books so you can buy them and read them in the proper order. That's the most tedious part, but once you're in, you're going to love it. So highly recommend it to anybody who's an older teen or an adult and wants a new fun fiction fantasy title to read. But basically, the books tell the whole story of The Witcher. There's a very definite ending. And then Witcher 1 starts off basically making up an excuse for why the ending isn't the end of the series. And then the second game is just kind of playing off of this unique story that continues from the first game. And it's, quite frankly, it's not that interesting, the story of the first two games. The third game is where they kind of go back to the book lore and the book storylines that were kind of left to dangle, because there's a lot of things that were just left threads that just weren't finished in the book series and the proper volumes. And The Witcher 3 really fleshes them out in a way that's a lot more enjoyable for book fans and lore fans. So you will miss some context and some things they talk about, and you'll see characters that you don't recognize talking to you very familiar. But if you read the books, you'll know who they are. If you played the first two games, you'll know what they are, who they are. But I would recommend, of the two, if you're going to invest time and you don't have enough time to do both, read the books and then jump in The Witcher 3. It's a much more approachable experience. A lot of things are very self-explanatory. If you know the books, you know the characters, because of how well CD Projekt Red executed the games, particularly the third game. So definitely highly recommend. They have a PS5 modern era graphical and performance update. So if you're playing on PC or I forget what the newest Xbox is already. What's it called?
Series X?
Series X, yeah. Series S and Series X and PS5. If you have any of those systems and you want to take advantage of the new graphics, you can. If you already bought the game, you can actually upgrade for free. It's very tedious. I talked to Emery about this a few episodes ago. They make you do all these stupid steps, and each step leads to you accidentally clicking purchase the game. So you got to be wary about the upgrade process. It's a little bit predatory, but sorry, got a little bit of a cough going. But once you get through it all, it's awesome. Like it's a huge quality of life improvement. I do not recommend the ray tracing mode. It's a whole lot of nothing for how much performance you give up, and the actual like updated frame rate is far superior to the ray tracing, in my opinion.
I will say, Witcher 3, I saw it is on Switch, so for you people who like to play on the go, there's another reason to...
Yeah, I mean, it's a long game, and it, like, to do even the simplest thing takes a lot of time investment, so if you have a long commute, that's great, but you may not want to do that unless you're planning on sitting around for a while, especially if you want to get invested in the characters and stuff. So
can I circle back to something for a moment, because something just came to me as you were talking about fantasy novels.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to The Last of Us for a second, because I am in the opposite camp of you folks, which is that I never played the game for 1 second, but I did watch the show and am watching the show.
Yeah.
And I can say, as a person with no expectations because I never played the game, it's one of my favorite shows I can remember seeing in quite some time.
Yeah.
And I feel that I'm able to enjoy it uninhibited because I have no expectations for they need to be true to this, they need to be true to that,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Like I can just sit there and enjoy the brilliance of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey and and the work that they're doing on this show without having to worry about their faithfulness to its origins, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And this made me think, I thought of that because I was thinking about House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood now. Because now I'm a person that's read Fire and Blood. When I first watched House of the Dragon, I hadn't read it yet, but now I have read it, and now I do see the differences. But to me, House of the Dragon is just a really good show. So, yeah, I see the differences. I see the ways where they were unfaithful.
Yeah.
No, that didn't happen in the book. Oh, this character is totally
I don't think
cut out of
there's
the
any
book.
issues with faithfulness. I think it's just the portrayals, like, because the director famously told the actors and actresses not to play the game, so they didn't change their performance to better match the characters. So I think that's probably more where it's coming from, where the personalities are just a little different than they would have been if they had played the games. And
you also have kind of a tall order. I think Pedro Pascal's a fantastic fucking actor, but Troy Baker is the voice of Joel.
Yeah,
Troy Baker is an industry.
He's like the best video game mocap artist, like, period.
Who did find his way into the TV show, just so everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
He did find his way
I
into
did hear
a part
that.
on the TV show, yes.
Which is great.
Yes, an interesting part. He's playing a grizzled soldier, so keep your eye out for him when you do eventually watch the show.
That's cool.
But I do feel that, there are big changes to central characters in Fire and Blood versus House of the Dragon, too. I mean, the Viserys character especially is wildly different, although in this case, I think it's very clear that the Viserys of television is vastly better than the Viserys of the books, and George R. R. Martin himself said that to Patty Considine about this, that bringing this character a new level of depth by letting the actor do what he does, which is act and bring emotional depth to the table, really brought a certain level of improvement. But there are also characters that you read the book and you really like, and then they're just not in the show at all. And that's disappointing to see too.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I love the show for the show, and I love the book for the book. And I'm not going to judge anyone that feels that the characters should be a certain way based on how much they love the game and how much they love the characters in the game. But I can say, as someone who's just watching the show, that I love the show. It's fantastic. It's totally got me into the franchise in a new way that I probably would never have gotten into it because I'm not a gamer. Yeah. But I am someone that now loves this franchise in some way because I've connected with the show, and it's now appointment television for me, and I'm having a great time enjoying the show. So just say that perspective is out there too, and I am totally against the whole tribal thing that we talked about. That's potential, but I think it's a great
totally
show.
The consensus I have gotten from people that have not played the game, that have watched the show. They say it's one of their favorite shows of all time. They're loving it. It gets better with every episode. Blah 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 blah. And I have not watched it, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. I think to your point a little bit, I think it's probably easier to go to like a similar, less fleshed out format of a property and then go into a more detailed one that fleshes things out way more and gives you like bonus material, like going from a show to a book or going from a movie to a book is. I think when you go in the opposite direction, in this case a video game to a show, there might be a little bit more potential for scorn or discourse, just because again you're going from the far more detailed bonus version basically, even if it's the original material, to a like lesser, squeezed into a nice 45 minutes or whatever the length is, version of whatever the source material might be. So to your point, you probably have the ideal approach where now if you do play the game, it's just like bonus, because now you just get to flesh out these characters even more. But
I will say this regarding adaptations. I think you're 100% right. It's always going to be easier to go from something that's like you have less screen time versus game time, right?
Yeah.
Versus a book, you always have more opportunities to see more of it. I think that the best thing that can happen is that someone watches something or plays something or just experiences something, and it makes them want more of it, and they get to delve deeper into it. With regards to faithfulness, I've seen a lot of videos, and I've been on either side of the thing where it's like you need to be really accurate or fuck it, do your own thing completely.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on what your goal is, right? Like Lord of the Rings, the 3 movies from 2001, 2002, there are an insane amount of differences between the books and the movies, and a lot of them are made conscientiously with like movie pacing in mind, and just a bunch of decisions that were not made just to like fuck with people or whatever. They were made like, hey, we need to make 3 movies with the climaxes, resolutions, whatever. And I think that everyone can agree those movies are fan-fucking-tastic, made biggest impact on the industry. But they do have differences from the books, and I think that if you're able to reconcile the fact that not everything needs to be a one-to-one interpretation of the original work, you can have different things I think that the best way you can judge an adaptation, right? It's an adaptation. It's not the movie of the book. That's like, it's an adaptation. It's always going to be that.
Yeah.
You want to ask yourself questions like, does it succeed in what it sets out to do? Does it succeed in telling the story that it's trying to take with the material that it went through? And is it faithful? I think the best question is it respectful to the source material? Not is it a one-to-one recreation, but does it respect the original themes and ideas that the original story had? And then at that point, right, you can change stuff. You can morph 3 characters into one if it makes sense, right? If it's not a book and a movie for 2.5 hours. But...
Yeah, and I mean, on a positive note, The Witcher is a perfect example of that. It's based off a Polish book series that, at the time of Witcher 1 coming out, wasn't even fully published in English. I had, for the last 3 books, I had to read student translations from Polish into English, and like it was kind of jarring because like the published ones were like very like well edited and like script was right, that there was a certain, you can tell from the way things are kind of intonated in the sentence how an author thinks and is refined in their craft. And like the student, it was a little rough around the edges. The vocabulary they used to describe the same exact things like dramatically changed, and so you could see a much less refined version of the story being told. So the first time I read the full series, like I had this weird like jump experience from a very thoughtful, well edited version into this Polish student translation, which is the only way I could get it. And then I later reread it with the updated productions and edits. And then I jumped into the Witcher games, and the Witcher games they were so solid on their own that, you know, I really didn't care that they weren't giving me the inner dialogue of every single character. And then like you get to Witcher 3, and in a lot of regards it's more detailed than the books. Yeah, I mean, it's explaining a bunch of threads that were left loose to unravel, you know, in the book series. So yeah, I think The Witcher is another great success story. I think where there isn't quite as a great success for me in going from the more detailed version to the less detailed version is Harry Potter, like famously. Because after they replaced Dumbledore, it just like ruined the experience. It became way more of a hostile, like aggressive, like weird aggro experience. And
Voldemort too.
Yeah, Voldemort.
Both of them were calm, collected characters in the books.
I couldn't stand Voldemort in the movies. I was like, what the hell are they doing? And I get it. I think if I watched those movies first, I probably wouldn't have had as much problem. Mm-hmm. I probably would have read the books and been like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But because I was so dedicated to reading the books first, and then I watched the movies, I'm like, I can't get down with these two characters, and they're two of the most important characters in the whole series.
What did you, just really quick, because this is an interesting thing, almost never comes up, the interpretation of Riddle in the second movie / second book, I suppose, versus him in like Half-Blood Prince. I really like him way more in the second one.
Yeah. I mean, the first two movies, I think, really captured the books in a really good way. Mm-hmm. I get it. You know, you're restricted within these 2 hours, these borders that you set for yourself in these movie timelines, and how much you can portray on a camera versus, you know, getting the full detail in the book and having the full description of the room and having the inner dialogue of Harry and Hermione and whoever else. And I think the first two movies absolutely capture that. I thought Dumbledore was played perfectly. Unfortunately, the actor died, which is why he wasn't Dumbledore in the later movies, and they changed directors in the third movie, and that's why it took a dramatically different approach. They changed producers. Like Chris Columbus was the director and the producer in the first two, and then they went to the third movie, and he just became like an executive producer. And so like the tone of the whole thing just completely changed. And I think you're 100% right. Like the Tom Riddle, that's more in line with the Voldemort that I had pictured when I read the books versus what came later.
I think we disagree on I like 3 and 4 for that dramatic tone shift, because I think it makes sense thematically. I think it makes sense that 1 and 2 are more kind of child whimsical fantasy in that sense, and 3 and 4 is when shit gets dark. You start to you learn more about Sirius Black. I love 3 and 4 for that dramatic shift, but I see exactly what you mean starting with 5. Because like that dramatic shift needs to have some kind of like 4 is the climax, I think, of that shift, is where Voldemort comes back, right? And everything after that, it has to be like, all right, stakes are higher than ever. This is no longer some mystery detective story about kids unraveling stuff. This is a war.
Yeah.
And I think it does not capture that after 4. 4 sets it up. I think it sets it up really well, where everything's so much darker. Everything's so much, people are dying, right? When Cedric gets killed, that marks a point in the story, right? You've never seen something like that happen to that extent up until then. And then, like, 5 just kind of like, yeah, he's back home. Yeah, there's Dementors now. And it's like, it just doesn't have that same thematic, like, there's a war. Shit has gotten past the point of, this is some dark brooding past we're looking into. And I don't think it earns it after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that perspective too, for sure.
I certainly agree with you about Michael Gambon and his betrayal of Dumbledore, and that's a case where not drawing on the source material really hurt because he admitted that he did not read any of the books before he decided to play Albus fucking Dumbledore, and it really showed in his portrayal.
Yeah.
Whereas, something like The Last of Us, it's my understanding that Bella Ramsey was told not to play the game before portraying Ellie, and I know there are fans of the game that complain that she's not enough like game Ellie, but again, as just a TV watcher, she's doing a great job creating a character named Ellie. I don't know how she's doing.
Yeah, so it's hard to know where to put the blame, right? Is it on the actor who just couldn't sell it even though he hadn't read the character? Is it on the screenwriter that gave him the version of Dumbledore to interpret? Or is it on the fact that they just never bothered to read the source material in the first place? Would both of them somehow have been better, even though the Ellie is obviously a very high standard?
What's her Ashley who? Do you remember the name of the voice actress for Ellie?
I don't recall. What's funny is they had actually cast somebody completely different and designed her to look completely different, and then at the last minute they had to change everything because she dropped out. I think it was a lot of people thought she was designed to look like Elliot Page.
Yeah.
She did a different Sony game instead, but apparently they had like a mocap of her, where it's like basically
Beyond Two Souls, I think, right?
Yeah, Beyond Two Souls.
Were they at the same time?
They had like you could hack it and basically get her naked body in the game, and like that pissed her off, and so she dropped out of the Last of Us project, and that's how supposedly that's the legend. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but like the character looked very much like Elliot Page back then. So. All right, well, that's a good place to jump into the news. As always, we put markers in the description. If you want to jump ahead to a specific point on the YouTube channel, you can definitely take advantage of that. Or if you're listening via audio service like Stitcher or iTunes or Spotify, you can also go to those markers manually and jump to the portion of the show that you're really looking forward to. So, first up, we got TV and movies. First item on the news, Star Trek Discovery has announced that Season 5 will be its final season. It will arrive on Paramount Plus in early 2024. Any thoughts on this?
I have not watched any of Star Trek Discovery. I'm actually still working my way through The Next Generation. I am 3.5 seasons in, but once I finish that, I will watch Star Trek Discovery and Picard, and hopefully have thoughts before the show is over.
Have you gotten to the Borg yet?
Yes, was just introduced to the Borg maybe half a season. Yeah, that was the conclusion of season 3 was when they really, they introduced the Borg a little earlier. They just had a brush with the Borg, and then they really brought them as an invasive force at the end of season 3 in a 2-part episode, and I just got through that 2-part episode.
Cool. Okay. So I think you're just under halfway through. I think there's 7 seasons, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Really enjoy Next Generation, as Sir Pat Stew can clearly illustrate. It's my favorite Star Trek, period. And I think it's a lot of people's favorite Star Trek, period.
I just have to say, I'm working a job that I'm only a month in, and I made a Star Trek Next Generation reference the other day, and nobody got it, and it was very disappointing to me.
At a college,
so somebody
with scientists
came in, and I have a coworker that always has a different drink in the morning. Like, she's not someone that chooses a drink and then just sticks with that because that's what she likes. Like, it's something different every single day.
Yeah.
So she came in the other day with a London Fog. And one of my other coworkers asked, "What's a London Fog?" And she said, "Well, first you have Earl Grey tea." And I said,
hot.
Earl Grey, hot. And I actually kind of said it quietly. I was hoping they wouldn't even hear me, like I was just saying it for my own amusement. But they literally stopped their conversation and turned towards me. Like, they stopped their sentence. They stopped the exchange that they were having. They wanted to know what I just said. I don't know if they thought it was something rude, but
now I'm wondering if they thought it was like you were being like weirdly sexual with it.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know.
Oh, she's into Earl Grey, hot. Yeah.
So I said it again. I said, "Tea, Earl Grey, hot." And they stared blankly once again. Then a third person came in, also wondering what I was talking about, and this just became an ordeal. And I didn't know what was happening. I thought in this room with 3 people, one of whom is exactly my age, at least, somebody would have understood what I was saying, but they did not. So I had to explain the whole story. It's a terribly uninteresting story if you just don't get the reference the first time. If you get it the first time, you're like, yeah, Star Trek. If you have to explain, well, the thing is the captain of this spaceship, he like really likes Earl Grey tea, and he has to go to this machine where you can order anything you want, and so it became an ordeal.
Right. You just
Very
made yourself
disappointing
into
to
the
me.
office dork.
It was bound to happen eventually.
man.
All I did was speed up the inevitable. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have not watched the show either. I've heard a lot of bad reviews about the show, and a lot of people.
I don't know anyone who liked it.
Yeah, everybody seems to hate the show, so it's amazing that it got to 5 seasons with nobody watching. But at least it's confirmed it will be the final season. Again, I have not watched it.
Part 1.
I can't speak
Part A.
to how good or bad it is.
Don't you dare.
But yeah, it's definitely a bummer that there's a Star Trek property out there that's not quite up to snuff.
But I have heard better things about Strange New Worlds, so perhaps there is hope. I don't know if you folks have heard the same.
I haven't heard anything about it. I think I kind of wonder if like the failure to generate the next Star Trek movie combined with the poor performance of this show and the other show that was kind of like a reboot of the, like they brought in the captain that was in the first episode of the original Star Trek.
So that is Strange New Worlds.
Is that it?
Yeah. Captain Pike.
I've actually heard some bad things about that one. So don't know.
Conflicting reports
again,
coming in.
Have not watched a Star Trek season since Voyager. So definitely need to get caught up.
Voyager was 90s, right? 97?
I don't know when it. I think it started in like 97, late 90s, and then went into the early 2000s. But I might be.
It's
wrong.
after it goes original.
Because original series is in the 70s, right? And then
60s, I think.
60s into
70s.
70, yeah.
Yeah. And then Next Generation went into the early 90s, like 92 or 93, plus some movies. There was
Enterprise.
Enterprise
is
the one I'm
yeah.
thinking of.
Okay.
I think it's Enterprise then Voyager, right? Or is it
They
Voyager
both
then
had
Enterprise?
a lot less seasons than.
Yeah.
Next
Well,
Generation.
they had the Outpost one. What was it called? It ran at the same time as Next Generation and then went a little further. Why can't I... Deep Space Nine?
Deep Space
Space
Nine,
Nine,
yeah.
DS9.
Deep Space Nine.
And I have some friends who really like DS9.
And then I don't know if Enterprise came before Voyager or after.
I know. I always get those two mixed up.
I don't remember. Oh, well. Anyway, audience doesn't care. They'll probably correct us here in the comments. So
You will have angry Trekkies sending you emails.
Do it.
I look forward
Send
to it.
comments.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Trekkies. All right, next up on the news, Jack Casey, who played Black Tom in Deadpool 2, has been announced as the actor that will play Hellboy in the upcoming reboot movie Hellboy: The Crooked Man. While a release date has not been announced, the movie will be about the early life of Hellboy and will feature a younger, comic-accurate version of the character. So, if you are a fan of Hellboy, you can look forward to this new reboot. Unfortunately, the last reboot attempt did not go so well.
Who was the guy who played he was in Alien Resurrection.
Well,
which is not a good thing to remember him from.
The last reboot was David Harbour, who's from Stranger Things.
Maybe I'm thinking of 2004, maybe.
Neil Perlman?
Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ron Perlman is the OG Hellboy, and those movies are great. I mean, they're corny, they're goofy, they're comic book movies, especially like early 2000s comic book movies. But I love them. I love the first 2 Hellboy movies, and they got reviewed really well at the time. So
there was one since then, since the Ron Perlman version, because I didn't.
Yeah, there's a reboot. So the Ron Perlman version of Hellboy, I think that was Guillermo del Toro who did those movies. Those ones were very successful, and then they stopped after 2. And then there was a big hiatus where they did nothing with the franchise other than make comics for Dark Horse Comics. And then they tried to reboot, I think, and they announced it right before COVID, so it's probably timing that ultimately really made it worse. Starring David Harbour from Stranger Things, and he looked great. Like they really nailed the look, in my opinion, just as much as they did with Ron Perlman. But it just wasn't like the greatest writing. I think they were probably doing some green screen stuff that they wouldn't have done had it not been COVID time. There's just a lot of things that fell short in that movie. Unfortunately, I think there was some redeeming factors in it, but I just don't think it was up to snuff, especially when you compare it to an already successful version that preceded it. So unfortunately, they dropped the David Harbour version, but now we got a new one to look forward to. The franchise is not dead, so we will see what they do, and hopefully we get some more hellacious action from Hellboy. Next up on the news, Jason Blum and James Wan have announced they are working on a Dead by Daylight movie based on the video game of the same title. And based on your breathing, I'm assuming you have thoughts.
I like James Wan because I'm not a big fan of. You said you like ghost stories and supernatural stuff. I don't really like. I like more either sci-fi or grounded horror, but I can attest that the Conjuring movies are really, really good. I hate what they've become. Yeah. With like,
I mean, if it's successful in the first movie, they're gonna milk it for 8 more movies, regardless of whether the other 7 movies make money.
The problem I have with Dead by Daylight being a movie is that Dead by Daylight is like the Super Smash Brothers of horror, right? It's like you know the game. It's like
there's a bunch of characters from different franchises that go around.
Like it's
try to kill your characters.
It's a survival game where you're trying to repair generators and escape. But the whole point is that it's a cameo fest of characters from all these different horror movies and games and franchises.
Yeah,
this would be like someone trying to make a Super Smash Brothers movie.
Yeah, I have no idea how they're going to handle it. No idea. Like, unless they go like the Jumanji route and just make it like sort of a tongue-in-cheek, like the new Jumanji movies. That's the only way I can see them having even a remote chance of success with this.
But it's James Wan. Like, it's like James Wan is really good at like horror and suspense and stuff. This would be like Sam Raimi, I think, would be able to pull it. If anyone, I think.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I thought it was a terrible decision from the moment I saw it. I'm like, the only reason you would attach Dead by Daylight to the title is because kids recognize it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason to use that franchise label, because they don't have anything unique in that franchise. It's all other people's properties, which is just another issue to begin with, because now you got to like figure out, how do I get access to all of these licensed products, you know?
I'll do you one better. This gives me Uwe Boll vibes.
No.
Remember how Uwe Boll used to make those really shitty video games?
Yeah, it's going to be horrible.
This is going to be one.
Don't do it.
They should just give it to him.
Don't do it. All right. Next up on the news, Dave Filoni has confirmed we will likely not see the character Kara ever return on screen since Gina Carano was forced out of the role.
Bye, Felicia.
Carano famously fought mask requirements on set, supported voter fraud conspiracy theories during the 2020 election, and compared the social unrest towards Republicans to the abuse of Jews during the Holocaust, which obviously did not fly well with Disney, and they fired her. So I don't know who liked the character. I have not watched the series, so
I just rewatched the whole show again because my wife had never seen it, and I wanted her to get caught up before the new season. And I gotta say, she was fine for a few episodes, but I don't think that there was much more juice to come from that orange. I just don't think that there was really a need to have her around. Even her last couple appearances felt like she didn't really need to be there. She was interesting when they introduced her. You got her backstory as a shock trooper, and she helped out Din Djarin on some of his missions early on when he needed some extra muscle. But the last couple times she appeared, I just didn't think she was bringing much of anything to the table, and I don't think she's going to be missed as much as the first episode of the new season of The Mandalorian fell kind of flat for me. Even so,
I'm curious, how do they deal with her? Did they give her a story reason for leaving?
They addressed it, but they did it in like an offhand comment reason. So Din Djarin shows up in Navarro in the first episode of the new season and has a conversation with Grief, which is the person that was working, who was present for all of their dealings with Cara Dune, and he kind of gave a reason for why she's not there. I already forget what it is because I cared so little, but it was just sort of like an offhand comment of, she got caught up in this, and then they just moved on. So they didn't give us too much time on it. They didn't invest too much in it, but they did give an explanation. So
all right,
she gone.
Any thoughts, Nick?
I still haven't seen Mandalorian. Like I've literally, we just finished watching all 6 Star Wars movies with my girlfriend like a few months ago because she's never seen them fully.
Yeah.
And I did watch Kenobi on my own, which I regretted watching because of fucking... I know people like it. I know whatever it's like, but to me, it was like as bad as like basic fan fiction. It's like, what if you had the thing happen where the...
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
It was bad.
I really want to watch. I've seen a few episodes of The Mandalorian. I shouldn't say I haven't seen it. I haven't like sat down to watch it all the way through. I've seen a few like with friends and stuff. I really like it, but I want the full like sit down, start to finish thing. I haven't done that yet. But
Don't watch Kenobi if you haven't seen it. Do watch Andor. If you like anything related to Star Wars, please watch Andor. Please watch Andor. Do it for yourself. It's a masterpiece.
I will say though, when it comes to like these situations, like I don't understand why actors feel the need to like those are your opinions. Like that's unfortunate, but like maybe don't mix your craft with your personal opinions. That goes anywhere. Like I don't.
Or
think,
your workplace.
Right? Like I don't
Your
think
workplace is like, can you please wear a mask? And you just
like
belligerently fight them the whole time. like we're literally not able to make the movie if you just won't wear a mask.
Right.
So either you're fired or you need to wear a mask so we don't lose our rights to film this movie. Because back then they were like everything had to have like certain requirements. Everybody had to be tested. Everybody had to wear masks when they weren't recording or whatever.
It just for me it's like again a lot of these people I don't understand why the idea of giving actors like the pedestal to start making these like if they have opinions regardless if they're like radical or subtle or whatever they are.
Yeah.
I just don't think it ever works well, right? Like imagine you're an actor and you're a Republican. Would it really help your cause if like people watch your show? They could be both Democrat, but whatever.
Yeah.
Most people I don't think give a shit. And then you come out and start to like say opinions. All you're gonna do is alienate people. I feel all you're gonna do is like now attach an opinion that someone may feel really strongly for and someone may feel strongly against. You're not there for that. You're there to play a character and portray a story. And I think that should be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
taken into account.
There's a certain point where it's like, okay, I have an opinion that I know is going to be met with universal condemnation, like saying Republicans are like the Jews during the Holocaust. I know that. As an adult human being who is capable of conscious thought, I know that's a bad idea to put this out on a video on my Instagram publicly while I am employed and making millions of dollars to do what I do.
At Disney.
Maybe, just maybe, that would have been one of the moments where you might have wanted to use a filter or make that video private for just you and your friends and not go any further than that.
Or maybe, like, again, like...
It's like Kanye going to TMZ. Like, literally walking into TMZ and telling everybody that he loves Hitler. That literally happened.
Yeah.
He did not need to go straight to TMZ and announce to the largest audience he possibly could that he loved Hitler. There's some levels of restraint that need to happen, no matter how abhorrent your opinions might be in private.
It doesn't even have to be like necessarily... We're talking about like opinions that a lot of people would have issue with and that are shitty. Where it doesn't like the fact that you feel the need to like go out and let this known as an actor. Like I feel like people work at Walmart know better than to like stand in the middle with a megaphone and yell about their personal opinions on some controversial topic. Yeah. They would get fired.
I mean, most workplaces don't let you talk about politics, period.
For a reason.
Period. It doesn't matter how universal or friendly it is to person A or B. They don't let you talk about politics or religion or anything remotely potentially offensive at all. Because so it's not just Disney. It's like, any professional job environment will fire your ass for something like that.
It's like the age-old advice is like, how do you not get into fights with people? Don't bring up politics and religion.
Yeah.
This should be like, I don't know. Every time this comes up, it's kind of like, you're a grown-ass adult. Yeah. You should know better.
Yeah, she definitely should have known better and should have done something other than what she actually did. And she really only has herself to blame. So next up on the news, on a recent shareholder call, we're getting a lot of weird shareholder call breaking news from Warner Brothers Discovery. Last week, we found out that Mortal Kombat 12 or 13. I've already lost count. Whichever one the new one is coming out this year.
11. 12
no,
is coming.
I was gonna say we're definitely past 11. But yeah, that it was revealed on a shareholder call, like via Zoom, instead of like a big trailer, a big announcement like they usually do. Nope, CEO is just like, oh, by the way, we got Mortal Kombat coming, so buy our stock. It's like, what? You what? this year?
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I beg your pardon.
When do we sell Sub-Zero?
So CEO David Zaslav announced that new Lord of the Rings movies were in the works at Warner Brothers Discovery. Famously, recently, Embracer Group purchased the rights to the adaptations of the franchise last year, and they will be working closely with Warner Brothers Discovery to develop the new trilogy. The trilogy will be completely separate from the Amazon Rings of Power series, where Amazon famously spent $1 billion to develop their own interpretation that is separate from Peter Jackson's version of The Lord of the Rings. No filmmakers have been attached, but Peter Jackson has said publicly that to reporters that the studios have kept him informed every step of the way. So it seems like his influence will continue to be significant within the series, which is probably a good thing. They have not confirmed what this is yet, whether is it a reboot with, an updated cast, updated technology, or is it, a continuation of a specific character later in their life, or is it prequel stuff, or are they just making up their own stuff and doing something separately, completely separate from the timelines of the books? We don't know, but I'm scared. Somebody hold me.
I don't think this is going to go well. Rings of Power is certainly not going well. A show that Amazon spent $1 billion on and yet somehow managed not to pay one single actor that anyone has ever heard of before. I feel like Rings of Power is at least trying to draw on some of the extended lore from the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
And
it took all the extended lore and condensed it into like 10 years.
But if you're not
thousands of years of lore.
If you're not going to just try to make the same thing, though, where else are you going to go for your content as far as pulling from what is left that there's still meat on the bone?
I have to pick and choose something to be hopeful about. From what I've read, the fact that Peter Jackson is involved, if they want to do something, and this is where I read that it's not a reboot, it's not a remake of like the Lord of the Rings, the Story of the Rings thing.
Yeah,
I read that it wants to do something completely different. If they just want to do, it's a series of movies, right? So
yeah, they said it's going to be a trilogy.
If they want to tell a different story that's like before the War of the Ring or after, I would be very much down. I think that there's nothing bad. There's a lot more to pull from than just, the story of the ring.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has a lot of room for interpretation and exploration, like the Kingdoms of the East that, Sauron draws on for his military force, prior to, the orcs and everything else, kind of really becoming his rallying cry. There's the blue wizards. There's 2 blue wizards that went to the east long before the events of the Lord of the Rings books. Obviously, there's the other wizards, Radagast, who we see a little bit in this, particularly in the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings. You have Tom Bombadil, who really hasn't been explored very much. You have,
that is certainly an idea.
Yeah. I mean,
a musical.
That would be a trilogy musical.
Yeah. If you want to see some people take some mushrooms and just have a psychedelic experience with Tom Bombadil in the some kind of prairie.
Let me put it this way. I think as long as they're not because the problem with Rings of Power, ultimately, if you have to break it down to something, is they did not want to have to be responsible for accurately being respectful to the lore, and I think that they doubled down on it so much that that's what tanked it. That the story they told, they didn't give a shit. They were like, we're gonna do our own thing and we're gonna put whatever we want in it, and fuck you if you don't like it.
Yeah.
In fact, you're a bad person if you think otherwise.
Bezos is fan fiction.
Yeah, and it's like one doing that to anything, let alone, I would argue, one of the most important stories of the last 100 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's the cornerstone of all fantasy fiction.
of
Period.
high fantasy.
Yeah.
It's the framework for D&D. It's the framework for all this. Like, elves and dwarves existed before then, but we didn't have a foundation. He made it, but main point is, if they want to do something original and interesting that is respectful to the source material, I am all for it. And if Peter Jackson's involved, I have much higher hopes for it.
So here's two problems. So first, not to defend the makers of Rings of Power, because I fucking hate Rings of Power, but the makers of the show are actually the Tolkien estate. I think is the root problem here, because the Tolkien estate is very stingy with what content they release for people to adapt and how much they're allowed to draw from the original material when it comes to making things for the screen. Yeah. Because J.R.R. Tolkien didn't want stuff going to the screen from Lord of the Rings in the first place. Yeah. And they've really stuck to that. So there's actually quite a lot of lore that the makers of the show possibly could have drawn from, but their contract is so limiting in what they're allowed to use from the original content that a lot of stuff they have to make up. So when you have that problem, and I don't know how WB might be getting a different contract, and maybe we'll have access to things that the makers from Amazon don't have, but if Amazon paid $1 billion to make this show, you got to think they probably were able to pull a lot of whatever the Tolkien estate was willing to release for them to use. You got to think they pulled as much as possible under those circumstances. And that, in combination with the fact that I wasn't crazy about the Hobbit trilogy that Peter Jackson was last involved in.
Yeah,
he didn't
Lord
start
of the Rings. Making it though. That's the problem. It was made by a totally different director, and
they
then
switched
they realized that it was completely fucked, and they brought him in last minute to try to save it.
Like J.J. Abrams with Rise of Skywalker, basically.
Yeah,
I don't know. The Hobbit was like heartbreakingly disappointing for me, because the first movie was okay, but then it just got.
The thing is, the book is like this big. Well, and they made it into 3 giant, long movies. Just big, bloated CG fests where they just inserted their own shit. And
they wanted so much to capture the magic of the original Lord of the Rings, but they forgot, like, again, it's Peter Jackson, like, you can watch literally hundreds of hours of footage of how Lord of the Rings original trilogy was made, and it is fascinating on how much, like, from the armor to the storyboarding,
practical effects,
like, everything about it is like a magical adventure that literally in making it, that we'll never see that again. We will never see that level of dedication and craft, which is why I think there's so much respect even with the changes they made.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The best thing I would say is, if you can't do it well, don't fuck with it. And this is where it's like, okay, well, what you're describing, right? If they can't do anything with the material because the Tolkien estate is stingy and super fucking oppressive in what you're allowed to pull from because they want to just preserve it as what it is, then don't make fucking Lord of the Rings movies. Make your own fucking fantasy stories, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, ultimately, everybody's chasing a title franchise that they can slap onto their basically totally different thing, and just call it that so it can sell more tickets. I get it. I think the thing that gives me the most pause is that if you do anything related to any of these ageless characters like Gandalf or Saruman or Radagast, and anybody who doesn't naturally age very much, you're going to have a hard time explaining that when you need these actors to do a significant performance. I get it. Most of these actors and actresses are still alive. You can still call on them, but they're obviously...
Not Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee is definitely dead, yeah. But most of them are still alive, so you can still do a little something, but then you're going to be in this weird uncanny valley where you're not quite sure like how much your brain will let you buy into what's on screen if you don't use them and you replace them with totally new actors, but it's still the Peter Jackson world. You're like, wait, this isn't right either. Like, where's my Gandalf? Where's my, Saruman? Who the fuck is this guy? That was part of my problem with Rings of Power, is that they tried to be so different and yet use the same exact aesthetic as the Peter Jackson interpretation.
And you don't have Cate Blanchett as
and now you have all these characters that look close but not quite. They're not quite right, It's like that uncanny valley when video games were starting to become like fully realistic for the first time, and you're like, man, like, it looks real good, but the moment their eyes start moving or they start opening their mouth, you're like, ooh, something's not right here. Like, this is just creepy.
Well, they also didn't use what they had going for them very well either. I mean, that's why it was just not a well-made TV show. Like, to me, watching Rings of Power, there were two real highlights as far as characters and actors, and they were both new characters, Prince Durin and Adar. These were the two characters that really drew me in, that I thought the actors were giving really good performances, that brought a really interesting dimension to the show, and they would just disappear for whole episodes or 2 episodes. I mean, Adar seemed to disappear. They like introduced him, and he's really interesting, and he's compassionate to these orcs, and he cares about them, and he's a leader, and he's charismatic, and he has an ideology, and it's really compelling, and then he was just gone for like 3 episodes. And we just didn't see him for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So it was just a badly made show, but it also, the interesting thing about it is that a lot of fans that are like big fans of something, a franchise, a lot of times they think that if something is not faithful, it's because, you know, they need to put people in charge that are fans of this. Like we hear this with Star Wars a lot. Like whenever there's a Star Wars movie that's made, it just doesn't feel like Star Wars at all. They're just like, well, that's because this person is not a Star Wars fan. We need Star Wars fans making Star Wars. And the interesting thing is the Rings of Power showrunners are huge Tolkien nerds. Like these are 2 guys that met in college and said when they met in college, we need to do Lord of the Rings someday. We need to find a way. We need to build ourselves a rapport and a career and a reputation and a brand to the point that we can approach a studio and make Lord of the Rings, because that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah.
And it took them 20 years to get to this point where they can make the show, and now it's not working out, and it's just not going well, even though they did put 2 super fans, and Amazon said, okay, they want fans of this precious franchise to have the run of the show, and it didn't work out either. And I mean, I still think that the biggest root cause is the Tolkien estate, but also it just wasn't a well-made show, and they didn't use what they did have well. And it's very interesting that we're talking about fandom and faithfulness and how crazy some fans can be, and then also, you know, what it means to people, because that's a big theme of, well, the next part of the news.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to transition. The next part of the news, we got Scream 6 coming out on March 10th. What have you? I have not even bothered to watch a Scream movie after the first one, so you guys will have to keep me informed here.
Yeah, I think we disagree a lot. So how about bad cop, good cop?
Okay.
Go
Well,
ahead.
before we
first.
start, I want to know: did you watch Scream 1, 2, 3, and 4 back in the day as it came out, and have you seen Scream 5?
I believe I watched 1 through 3 a long time ago. I never saw 4, and then I just watched 5 for the first time like 3 days ago. So that one's fresh on my mind.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I watched Scream 1 and the real successor, Scary Movie 1.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Cabin in the Woods.
What's up?
So you want me to go bad cop first?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's get the
All right.
negative. Let's
Okay,
get the negative
here's-
take first.
We need the mood lighting.
Here's my rant on Scream. Scream 1 is one of my favorite movies ever, because it is a meta. The movie came out in 1996. It's Wes Craven, who is now dead, and it was a commentary about horror movies while also being a horror movie. And for being a very meta kind of humor in that sense, I like meta, like it's a horror movie, but it's also about horror movies. I think it's really good. I think it holds up. I think everyone should watch it. I think you can't even spoil the ending. I realized this when I rewatched it, because if you try to tell the person like who the bad guy is or whatever at the end, you can't, because it's like kind of written in a way where it's not even like, you can't really spoil it. There's like a safeguard against it and how the ending actually plays out, which is genius in a lot of ways. Scream 2 and 3 and 4 are not as good. I think 2 and 3 are where it like really got bad in terms of like they tried to add that twist again where it's a horror movie and meta, but also a horror movie. And then there's Scream 4, which I think it's kind of like Saw 7 in a way, where it has issues, but it's a good like, and that's the end of it. And you're like, you feel good. You're left with it. You're like, all right, I may have issues with some of how they
You
do
felt
stuff.
good after watching Saw?
I like Saw.
I
will defend.
I don't know. I felt a lot of things. I appreciated it was a great movie. I did not feel good after watching Saw.
I will say this. I will defend Saw 7. If we want to make that video sometime, we can have a discussion. I did my homework. I have a lot of arguments and reasons. But
How many Saw movies did they end up making?
there are 9 now. There's Saw 1 through 7, which were the yearly releases.
Shit.
There's Jigsaw, which is kind of a piece of shit. And then there's Spiral, which is a really big piece of shit. So,
Yikes.
but
Yeah. I knew they made way too many, but
Scream 5. So Scream 4 came out in like 2011. And it was like, all right, we get it. The whole meta horror theme and her mom and her dad and her, because the whole thing is her family history's fuck, which is like kind of its own reference. But they overdid it. 1 through 4, Scream really overdid it. Like 2, 3, and 4, it was too much. So now 5 came out, and 5 was fucking terrible. It wasn't funny. It wasn't really even meta, I don't think. It didn't appeal in any way where it was like, I didn't feel like it captured any of the spirit of the old ones, where it's like a good horror movie that makes fun of itself, but also is a good horror movie. Like, just... And again, it wasn't Wes Craven, and I think Wes Craven really understands horror. Like, I really admire the guy. He's like the Shinji Mikami, but before, and 20 years before, and with, Nightmare on Elm Street. And Scream 6, like, I think what I see here is they're trying to reboot the series. Maybe that's exactly what they're doing, and, like, whatever, but I don't like this, and this is kind of going back to what we were talking about with, like, if it's good... Which I think that if you watch Scream 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think the journey is worth it despite the pivots in quality. I don't think we need another Scream reboot. I think that they should make something original. And the whole idea of meta horror movies that are a good horror movie that makes fun of itself has also been done to death. Via Scary Movie 1 through 4. And Cabin in the Woods, which everyone thinks Cabin in the Woods is good, and it's horrible for the same reason that Scream is good, is that Scream did exactly what it did better 13 years before it did.
all right.
The man doesn't like Scream 5.
Good cop.
Okay.
You
Good
have the
cop
stand.
perspective. So, yeah, I mean, I actually agree that this new iteration, this new reboot is just unnecessary. I mean, it just is unnecessary. They're not creating a story that needs to exist, and it does feel like they're really it feels kind of like the Force Awakens, in that they just lean too heavily into bringing back everything you liked about the originals in such an obvious, transparent way that they're not even like bringing an original twist to it. They're just redoing the movie with slight tweaks. But I think the one thing that I found interesting about it, and full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of Jenna Ortega, so that probably clouds my judgment on these things.
It definitely clouds your judgment on these things.
I've never seen anything with her that I don't like, but beside the point. I think the one thing it does bring that's interesting and sort of works for me as a modern twist on Scream is the commentary on toxic fandom. And I think toxic fandom is like a real thing, and I think it's actually a real problem with a lot of our culture when it comes to entertainment. And I think that the movie, whereas the original was a commentary on horror movies in general while also giving you a horror movie, this gives you a horror movie while also giving you a commentary on toxic fandom surrounding not just horror but franchises in general and obsession, and what it can lead people, how it can lead people to dark places. I mean, obviously it's a totally cartoonish and absurd conclusion that it reaches here for the particular characters that are involved with the killing. No spoilers, trying to avoid spoilers. But I do think that there is something to be said about trying to take that Scream voice and turn it on a more modern problem that wasn't around in the 1990s that is very much around now, which is widespread toxic fandom, especially online. And so for me, that part worked. There were things I found funny. I don't know what the actor's name is that plays Huey Dewey on The Boys. Huey on The Boys.
I was literally about to say Keith Urban, but I realized that's the other
No, I don't remember his name.
Well, Huey's in the movie, and
Screwing
Huey is the comic relief character for me, and he did make me laugh a couple times. So I'll give him that, and he was a great casting choice.
Huey
by
is
the way,
my
for what
least
they have him
favorite
do.
part of The Boys.
Oh, see, so we're on total opposite
There
ends of
we
this.
go.
We're on total opposite
There we
ends of
go.
this. He was my favorite part.
See,
of
this
the
is
movie.
great. This is the discussion we need.
He's my favorite part of the movie because he brings, it's like inserting Huey into a Scream movie. Like, he just doesn't understand why everybody's getting involved in these things. Like, why are we going back to this town? You're just talking about murdering people.
You
I don't wanna
calling
get
him
stabbed.
Huey makes me laugh because in Scary Movie, the retarded version of the comic relief character is called Dewey, and Dewey's like,
Oh, yeah, well.
he's using the vacuum cleaner to suck himself out. Stay out of my room.
Well, yeah, David Arquette is Dewey, right? So that's
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah,
getting. That's why
the
I'm getting
original
confused.
cop in
Yeah.
Scream.
Yeah,
1.
that's why I'm getting confused because they bring back Dewey, but they also cast Huey from The Boys as a major character. So that's why I'm getting confused. But yeah, I mean, I think it has all the problems that The Force Awakens had for Star Wars. And I agree with you that it's unnecessary. You could have just not made the movie and everything would be fine. But I do think there were some things of value that it brought to the table that kept me watching and interested enough that I will go try Scream 6 when it comes out.
I find it hilarious how many times a lot of these characters have been stabbed and are just still alive, just still floating around in the franchise.
Well, you'd be surprised at the stab wound survival rate. I'm just saying. If you don't hit a major organ or an artery.
I guess.
I was going to say we should do something because it comes out March 10th.
Oh.
Would you want to go see it? And then we can.
We need a guest review.
Okay.
I think
All right.
I'd be down for
Let's do it.
Because I like oppository views in this sense. Because, one, I think it helps me see different perspective and understand something that I may have missed. But I think that the goal, I think I can speak for the show in the sense that the goal here isn't to like, here's what we like and fuck you if you don't like it. If you disagree.
Your goal. No, I'm kidding.
If you like Wednesday, you suck.
It's my favorite show. Go on.
But this is like for the viewers, if you have differing opinions or perspectives, or sometimes again, different aspects of production that may contribute to the context of why something is better or worse and just makes you think of it in a different light, go put it in the comments. Like I think that's what's spurring discussion in nerd culture.
Yeah. It's just fun.
It's kind of the point too.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing.
That's why this podcast exists. It's
Like-
fun.
There's nothing fun, despite what like a lot of internet culture seems to have become. There's nothing cool about a bunch of people who circle jerk the same. Oh yeah, this is so good. Oh yeah, this is so bad. It's a lot more interesting when people disagree.
Yeah.
And out of it, you see different aspects of something that different people appreciate for different things. Which is why I think we should both go see it. And we should both, maybe like the week or two before, well, I guess it's going to be in a week, but maybe like watch the Scream movies you haven't at least watch the first one, maybe the fourth one, just to like refresh yourself. And then we can have an official like sit down who thought of what. This is an opportunity to do that, I think.
My this is kind of funny history point with me and Dan. Sorry, I've had a cold all week and it's finally going away, but now I'm losing my voice again.
Clearly.
But we went to see Star Wars Episode 8 together. And I ruined the movie for him after we left because he came out like pretty happy. He was like, "Oh, I got to see Puppet Yoda. This was cool. That was cool." And I'm like, "I think it was a bad movie, man." He's like, "What do you mean?" And I started like pointing out every issue that I had with the movie and every flaw. And I'm like, "That was a terrible Star Wars movie." And then he came back to me like a week later. He's like, "You were right." He's like, "It's terrible."
Yeah, I mean, I just turned my brain off, okay? When I hear that Star Wars music and see the scrolling text, I just turned my brain, Star Wars, yeah! I turned my brain off, and I just enjoy myself, and I'm thankful that I have a Star Wars movie.
I had that happen
and then
to
this
me.
guy has to go tell me all the problems that I didn't notice the first time, and all of a sudden I'm looking back and I'm saying, okay, what the fuck was going on in that theater?
And when episode...
I had that happen with Batman v Superman.
I didn't know what was
The first time
happening
I
to
saw
me.
it, I was just so excited to see like the Trinity on screen. I didn't give a fuck. I was not focused on that at all. I saw Batman just blowing people up. I was like, fuck yeah.
I was happy before I realized I had been violated.
And then after I left the movie, people were pointing stuff out to me, and I'm like, oh shit, it is bad. And then I watched it again. I'm like, fuck, it's terrible.
I had the opposite happen with Prometheus, which I still think Prometheus is the worst movie in the Alien. I think AVP is horrible, but it's not.
I don't even count that one.
I don't. Okay, if you don't want to
That's a
count
fan
AVP
fiction.
and AVP Requiem, Alien Resurrection.
Alien 3 is terrible, though.
Huh?
Alien 3?
I love Alien 3.
Really? Oh, I can't.
I think it deserves.
I have so much trouble watching that movie.
I think separate topic. At some point, we need to come up with.
We
a
can
list.
rewatch it. We can put it on our comic movie master list series where we watch old ones.
I think Alien 3 is very much, you have to understand what the hell it is and understand that it's not a feel-good movie. Aliens was a feel-good movie to an extent because it was an action movie and everything was like, all right, we're going to have finally the big Marines versus aliens. And even then that went bad. Alien 3 is like, no, shit's fucked and shit's going to be fucked. And the only way to play or is to win is to not play. And I really like that. I like that it had a nihilistic moment that I think it deserved given the
I thought the
context.
whole I'm the mother thing, and it's just like, oh my god, what do you do? Why
We should discuss this.
I just hate it.
I don't want to get into it because it's a long, I have a lot of opinions on Alien, but Alien Resurrection was fucking terrible. I think the one where they clone her, and
I don't think I watched that one.
it was like 90. It had Winona Ryder in it, which
Yeah, I must have missed that one.
But no,
I saw Aliens 3. I don't know if it was Alien 3 or Aliens 3.
I think it's single.
It's a single one. Yeah. I did watch Aliens versus Predator, but I don't count that because it's just dumb. It's stupid. Turn your brain off.
It's Paul W.S. Anderson again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
No. So did you see Prometheus?
No, I skipped that one. I do want to see the Hulu movie they just made though, with Predator.
Oh, Prey.
Yeah,
I hear that one's okay.
That looks dope.
That looks. I've heard some stuff that makes me. I still need to see it.
I know the synopsis of Prometheus, but I didn't watch it.
Prometheus, I think, did more damage to the alien.
Well, it's that over-explaining thing, right? We were talking earlier about things being vague, making them better.
Well,
and they just over-explain the origins and the creators and all.
Yeah,
the
they're
engineers
like
or
the engineers showed up, and they and it's all like a metaphor for like they take a sip of life and it kills them because their matter breaks down and it goes into the planet, and that's how we get humans, and then they go to the planet where they come from, and the alien is like it's not. They don't even explain where the alien comes from, but. Prometheus is like a 0 out of 10 movie for me.
Well, didn't they say they created them to counteract the development of life or something, or control the development of life?
No, that's like Predator.
I don't know
Predators.
if they expanded that or not.
No, no, Prometheus was. I just want to say this is where unnecessary movies comes into play. If you want to make your own sci-fi story about an alien creature as a theme for. With Alien, it was rape and all that. With Predator, it was like the whole what if the best of the Earth, muscular people were not enough. You had all these. If you want to make your own movie, make it. Put your own title on it. Come up with a good story, and hopefully, if it's really good, people will like it. And 10 years from now, people will remember it. And maybe you'll get a sequel, maybe more money. Don't do this shit.
Or you can just keep making Avatar movies.
Oh.
And make billions of dollars every 15 years. That's also an approach.
They've already made Avatar 3.
And 4.
Aren't they deciding on 4 based on how 2 and 3 go?
3 and 4 are already created and all have the same villain.
That's the part I couldn't get over in this new
5
one.
and 6.
I can't believe I sat through 3.5 hours of this fucking Jughead again after waiting 13
I don't know why you
years.
saw it in theaters. I don't understand.
Because that's the only reason to see it is for the visual spectacle.
You're the problem.
No,
you're where the $1 billion are
that
coming
is the
from.
only value it brings to
I agree, but you're not wrong. They're just gonna I might as well see it in theaters. They're more money to. If they were made already 3 movies, who gives a shit? They don't give a fuck about your financial contribution.
They already made most of the material for the first 4 movies, and they all feature the same villain because they filmed the mocap for most of them at the same time.
When he survived at the end of this, I mean, spoiler alert, but when he survived at the end of this, I was just like, fuck.
I mean,
I can't believe
we've already
I'm gonna
elaborated
sit
the
through
first
this guy
4
again.
3 more times.
And then, depending on the success of Avatar 2, that's what would decide whether Avatar 5 and 6, where apparently they get real wild and have something else going on, would get created. And obviously they made $2 billion, so now it's greenlit and we're getting 6 of them.
I didn't know Dances with Wolves was such an interesting story.
I don't get why James Cameron is doing this for the rest of his career, basically. This is it. This is all he's got now. He's got 6 fucking movies to make.
Because he likes nature. That's pretty much the only answer he gives
One
us.
of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and he's going to spend his last probably 40 years of life making Avatar films.
Seriously, Terminator 2, Aliens.
My favorite movie of all time, Terminator 2.
Mine too.
Yeah, just
like Terminator 1 and 2 and Aliens are like top 2. Like they both take both because they're kind of inverses of each other, both of those series. How funny how that is. But like, for fuck's sake, you make those two, then you make Titanic, which I know some girls like it. My girlfriend loves it. Like
it's fine. It's too long.
It's like
it's another movie that made $1 billion. So there you go.
But like you go from like movies that everyone can enjoy to like this like somber fucking saccharine shit, and then you go to Avatar, which is like nothing. Like it's not deep.
It's disappointing.
It's not interesting.
It's very disappointing. But
anyway,
whatever.
We should go see it. We have discussion. That would be
okay. Let's reconvene on Scream.
So
let's scream.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we gotta have our Alien 3 discussion and our Scream 6 review. All right. Well, we're going to move on to the video game section of the show. So, again, in the show notes, you can always jump ahead to a different section if you'd like to. It's there for your convenience. And, of course, give us a like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. It helps us out a lot. All right. First up, March 10th is National Mario Day. Anybody celebrating?
Well, you don't play video games.
I don't play video games, so I got nothing.
I don't give a fuck about Mario other than this
Really?
upcoming movie. Yeah, I was a Sega kid. I didn't care.
Okay.
Yeah, I was Sonic. Sonic all the way.
I might play like
Sega
Super
do what
Mario
Nintendo
Galaxy.
don't. All right, blast processing, motherfucker. You heard of it?
The Bit Wars.
I'm gonna watch the live-action Mario Brothers movie, an all-time classic.
The 85 one.
Oh yeah, classic, iconic stuff.
You know from our group chat, but when I worked at Lowe's, we worked with a guy that looks exactly like the Koopas or the Goombas or whatever, the reptile bald-headed things in that movie.
Anyway, if you're doing anything for March 10th, put in the comments what are you going to play? What did you play? Go back to the
If you got
classics.
some
Play a 3D
cosplay or anything, send it into the show at HitTheBooksVids@gmail.com. We'll put it on the next episode of the podcast in celebration of Mario Day. There's no doubt that Mario has been such a big franchise for Nintendo, the headline franchise for Nintendo from which all its party games are built and everything. So there's a lot of iconography that Mario is responsible for in the video game industry. No doubt. Next up on the news, Telltale Games has announced that The Wolf Among Us 2 has been delayed to 2024. This is disappointing for me. I'm a big fan of The Wolf Among Us and the Fable comics. During COVID, one of my catch-up projects was to catch up on a bunch of books that I had never finished because, I start reading them while they're ongoing, and then I get busy, and then I have to, find the back issues to go back to them. I just went ham. I had a big list that I read off to Emery when we finally restarted the show after COVID. And Fables was among them. I absolutely adore that comic series. It's created by Vertigo, who was an independent side business for DC Comics, and now they're kind of folded into DC Comics. They don't have their own label anymore. But it was just great. Outstanding. It is adult oriented, but because it's based on fairy tales, there's some kind of optimism to be had. And The Wolf Among Us just focuses on basically the very first short arc of the series, and this series went on for a long time, hundreds of issues, and really went deep. And it's just excellent. I really enjoy the comic series. I was really looking forward to this. I know Telltale Games has fallen on hard times, especially recently. They really just recently got their business back up and running after they had to take a bunch of their games down because they didn't own the IPs that they were made off of. So their IP rights expired, and they had to remove the things they worked on and collected all the revenue from the game stores, and it was just a whole convoluted situation. So
I really liked I've never read the comics. I wanted to. I was in high school when Wolf Among Us 1 was coming out episodically.
Yeah.
I fucking love the game. Did you play the game?
Yeah, it's great.
It ends on such an awesome cliffhanger, and now it's 10 years later almost.
Yeah,
and we still don't have. So I was excited for Wolf Among Us too because I thought I didn't care for Walking Dead as much. I thought it was good. I just This is another zombie story that wasn't.
I felt the same. I think Walking Dead was definitely at the height of its power, so it was more popular at the time.
Yeah.
But I definitely thought Wolf Among Us was more entertaining, more refined.
I loved Wolf Among Us.
The Batman one was pretty solid too. I don't know if you played the Bat ones. There's 2 Batman.
I didn't play the Batman. I wanted to, but that
they're
was
solid.
A weird time.
It's not the best thing in the world, but it's solid.
I know they also did like a Game of Thrones one.
Yeah, they did a Tales from the Borderlands one.
I heard that one was good.
That one was like legit funny. Like I really enjoyed that one.
They did some cool stuff. Like I know it's like
Guardians of the Galaxy. They did a Guardians of the Galaxy season.
I don't know about that.
I haven't played that one, but I hear it was pretty good as well.
I know that they David Cage kind of established that whole movie game with like Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy.
Yeah, I loved Indigo Prophecy as a kid. I played that game so many times, and now I play it now. I'm like, this is trash.
I love it until the halfway
garbage.
point when it gets all
it gets stupid. It gets real.
I love
dumb.
Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain's great.
Heavy Rain's like
Detroit Become Human. I liked, but Emery hates.
I still need to play Detroit. I tried Beyond Two Souls, but it had too much of that supernatural bullshit I didn't care for. But the reason
I didn't like it, and I like supernatural bullshit, so it wasn't good.
It was also told out of order. The reason I bring that up is that so David Cage was like he made those were like interactive movies essentially, and then these guys made this cel shaded kind of interactive movies essentially.
Yeah,
and it was really cool for a while. They came out every year with one, and it was just kind of weird because their history as their company was, like you said, they kind of just folded after a few years.
Yeah, I think they're actually owned by somebody like a big giant company came and just devoured them when they went bankrupt because of all those rights issues they were dealing with, and then their engine was still not fixed years and years into it. So they were having a lot of lawsuits from broken games, basically.
I'm excited for this. I'm sad it's still delayed, but I will wait. I will replay the first one.
Yeah.
And
apparently, I think they're making a Hellboy game too, which is also awesome to see. I don't know how the hell they're going to sustain this though, because they keep paying for IPs that they don't own the rights to, and then when those IP rights expire, they're fucked. So they have to make so much money at the launch and in the short period of time where they own the rights to actually recoup and maintain the rights or make it worth having owned the rights. It's a whole weird situation. So.
I guess another example here is if you really liked all the Telltale games and you want to see more of them, buy Wolf Among Us 2. Go play the first one, catch up. You got 2 people telling you who are fans of the version of this kind of game.
Yeah.
If you're not a fan of games that are kind of an interactive movie, you might not like this stuff. Yeah. But if you are and you want to see more of it, definitely show these guys you give a shit.
Read the comics too. They're excellent.
Get into the stuff that they actually...
They're even better than the game. They're excellent comics. You can probably get them at your public library at this point. A lot of library services actually have digital options where you can read it digitally through your library subscription. So you don't have to shell out hundreds and hundreds of dollars for these comics if you don't have it. Like, obviously, we want you to support your local comic book shops and all that stuff. But if you're just trying to power through 400 issues of Fables because you get sucked in, take advantage of your public library and other free services. Don't pirate. Support your artists however you can. But library is fine because the library had to purchase it, right? All right, next up on the news, Focus Entertainment has announced the release date for their Gamescom title Atlas Fallen. The game will now be available May 16th. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer for this game. Looks dope. I loved it. It was when Gamescom had all their trailers. Emery and I talked about it with the breakdown. It was crazy how many new titles, like unique titles, were featured at Gamescom, and then like every other show since then has just been like remake, remaster, blah 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 blah. But I give Gamescom a lot of credit because they showed a lot of new franchises, and Atlas Fallen was one of the ones that looked like the most refined. Really, it's like I guess like a heavily armored, medieval fantasy, but with like very flashy animated magic abilities and set in some kind of like dystopian desert environment. It looks awesome. So if you guys have not seen a trailer and you're interested in something along those lines, go look at it. It's a feast for the eyes. Maybe the game will be terrible, but it looks awesome. Next up on the news, following the failures of the big budget title from Square Enix, Forspoken, they have announced the studio and talent will be folded back into the company and will no longer be working on new, unique titles of their own. So, a little bit of a sad bit of news from a game that was highly anticipated among the gaming community, but after that first trailer, they really kind of went downhill. A lot of people were like, oh, that trailer's kind of cringe. I don't know about that dialogue. And then the game came out and it was broken and had significant issues and pacing issues and storytelling issues. And I have not played it, but it reviewed, basically average to poor across the board. Not completely broken, not completely without merit, but people clearly didn't like it as much as they anticipated, and certainly not as much as Square Enix budgeted for. So, unfortunately, the studio will be no more as an independent entity. But hey, nobody lost their jobs, so congrats to Square Enix for doing the good guy thing. Everybody keeps their jobs. Good job. Next in the news, Final Fantasy XVI receives its release date of June 22nd. What do you guys think?
You're excited, right?
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm bursting with
This
anticipation.
guy, big Final Fantasy fan.
Oh,
the
yes.
biggest.
I played all
Everybody
of the first
knows
15. Can you even play 15? I don't know.
It's not finished, but you can play it. If that tells you.
You can watch
anything.
a movie or two. Or
Yeah.
three.
You can do a significant amount of homework so you can understand the opening of the video game, which is not finished and took like 17 years to finish from its original project.
But Sean Bean's in the movie, though, so it's okay. And Lena Headey, Cersei.
I don't care. It's bad.
I think 16 looks really good. I hope it's good. I hope it's better than 15 Beastie Boys origin story. I hope it's better than 13 My Waifu, when game and movie director people start injecting their waifus into video games, nothing ever goes well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I have this whole love-hate relationship with modern Final Fantasy outside of the MMO ones. Because I just don't think the corny Japanese-ness of the series really aged well into realistic graphics with like the over like emphasizing almost like anime like acting, but with like photorealistic characters and designs. And
I think voice acting also takes a massive hit. Some of the dialogue is just much better like read out loud, but then when you have someone act it, it's like oof. Yeah, it's cringe when you see somebody who looks like a real live human being doing ridiculous things with big anime hair, like Final Fantasy 15, like it looks like a K-pop group, like a male K-pop group. The story wasn't finished because these games are just so bloated. They make the directors of these games keep falling into the abyss. They make the directors of these games work on way too many projects at once, and so none of them have a coherent, fully fleshed out story and world. 15's really fun. I won't take anything away from that. And when the first half of that game was like, man, this is incredible. And then I realized pretty quickly, like, oh, there's no point to this. We're not working up to anything significant. They're just kind of making it up as they go. And then they had like all this planned DLC to like flesh it out, and then they canceled half of it, and they're like, never mind. We were going to finish the story, but we're not really going to finish the story. What also sucks, and this is like going back to like the technological talent, like the old games, they had, the technological advances at the time. They did what they could, right? With with 7, the first 3D one, it was groundbreaking. Now people are like, oh, it's polygonal, it looks kind of shitty, but they did what they could. Now they have the technology, but the writing and storytelling is almost like somehow worse, and
it's significantly worse.
Like the stories they no longer have to do I feel like it's a balance. It's the issue of they can make it photorealistic, they can make it like a movie, right? Like Advent Children, they made 7 Remake, the whole game looks like Advent Children, the movie, which is fucking amazing from a technological standpoint. But when the writing is shit, it's bloated, it's slow, and there's no like epicness to it. Like Final Fantasy, the name of the game is supposed to be like this epic Final Fantasy adventure, and when all these games are just kind of like, they'll make like 20 more anyway.
Yeah,
it's not fun.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the trailers look good. I'm not a fan of the Final Fantasy 15 battle system that it looks like they're just bringing in, because it's one of those things that's really flashy, really eye-catching, but it just plays itself basically.
It's Kingdom Hearts.
Well, even Kingdom Hearts gave you some control, right? Like you're still choosing what you're doing. You're still like, you can employ Goofy and Mickey to do specific things. This doesn't even give you. I'm referencing Final Fantasy 15. It doesn't even give you that. And then you go back to like 13, where they have these like charge up systems where everything just basically plays itself as long as you hold down a button.
When you have auto battle as an option and you're strategic, like where the gameplay is choosing, what his weaknesses are, when to wait, when to defend, when to cast the spell, and there's an auto attack, but like not auto attack as in everyone just melees, but auto as in it'll decide purport, like an algorithm in there will be like, this is most likely.
Yeah.
You fucked up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like Final Fantasy, as far as the gameplay mechanics, the whole point of Final Fantasy as an RPG was to be thoughtful about how you built your characters out, how you assign materia in Final Fantasy VII, for example, and combine their abilities to enhance them in different ways with multipliers and whatever else. Like you could literally, if you were creative enough and you leveled up like materia high enough, you could do stupid shit like make Knights of the Round Table the strongest summon in the entire game happen 10 times in a row. Yeah, and just obliterate people. But you had to put in the work, and you had to be creative, and you had to know what you could and couldn't get away with. And people come up with like crazy creative ideas. Like I love watching them on YouTube where they fight like Ruby Weapon or Emerald Weapon, and they have certain parameters, and they kill everybody except for one character with 1 HP, and they have to still win somehow. And they basically just set up their build in this specific way where they can defeat the hardest boss in the entire game in like one move with their time base. So, there's no options to really achieve that. Now it's just, hold down X, jump, roll, hold down X.
The worst part, this is the last thing I want to say just regarding recent, and this is where I hope it's good. I've pre-ordered it because I want to play it. But if it's not good, I might not buy the next one. So that's my attitude. But with regards to upgrade systems, I'm really sick of arbitrary bullshit upgrade and level up systems whereas back in the day, it's like you level up, plus, you get more HP, you get more mana. You have every level up is like a proportional growth in your stats. Nowadays, it's the same thing, except I have to go into a menu and press X on the spend your 3 points to do the arbitrary one. Like, there is nothing exciting about a 1.5% increase in your maximum HP pool.
Yeah.
That I have to press a button to do. Whereas it was automatic back in the day. Now it's like I go into a menu and like, oh, you're upgraded your tree. It's linear. It's a line. It's just squiggles. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
I am a little excited by the setting because now surely they can't come up with an excuse in a medieval world to insert advertisements like the Top Ramen quest line, where you can complete this quest line and get a Top Ramen hat for your character. No, it wasn't DLC. Yes, it was built into the main game. How about advertisements for Coleman furniture and camping equipment every time you rest your party? That sounds like a great time, right?
I don't play video games, but I kind of want a Top Ramen hat for my character, and don't call me Shirley.
I mean, hey,
Classic.
At least you don't have Norman Reedus drinking Monster Energy to get his stamina up so he can deliver packages in our shattered, sharded world.
Yeah. We'll see. And I get it. They had to make money somehow because that game way overblew its budget and was in development for way too long. It was supposed to be the sequel to Final Fantasy 13, like initially. It was called Final Fantasy Versus 13, which was like a spin-off of the same world, and it just never happened. It just never. We got the trailer in like
13?
12 maybe? Yeah. But it did not come out for a
cool,
long time.
But
yeah. Moving on. From Software has announced a new DLC for its George R. R. Martin collab game, Elden Ring. The DLC will be called Shadow of the Erd Tree and has no release date. So, For those Game of Thrones fans that want those books finished, it's not happening. He's too busy doing other stupid shit.
I love Dark Souls. I love Bloodborne more than Dark Souls even.
Same.
Elden Ring was okay. I didn't think the open world did much. I think the fact that you can go out of order is kind of stupid in this kind of game almost. And I think that the bosses that are recycled is kind of obnoxious. On the best end, it's a little like jarring. On the worst end, it ruins like encounters for you. Like there's a random encounter that's the same boss from a main like story boss that's supposed to be big and epic, and you just find a version of that in the mine shaft somewhere. I think that's kind of fucking dumb, and that's a reason why open world I didn't think was good. But Elden Ring I think is a solid game as is. I think DLC is good because I think they've always done DLC very, very well. Like they had the Artorias DLC for the first game, which was fucking awesome. They had the 3 different crowns in 2, the sunken.
I played Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne. I did not play Elden Ring or any of the. Yeah, I didn't play the other ones. Didn't they have another one with like a demon arm guy or something like that? Everybody forgets about it.
DLC or game?
Game.
It was 1, 2, 3. Demon Souls. Demon Souls Remastered. Bloodborne.
They had another game in there. It was like it was a Japanese like inspired world.
Oh, Sekiro.
Is Sekiro then?
Sekiro Shadows Die Twice.
Okay, yeah. That's the one. But I played a lot of the games, not all of them. But I never touched a single one of the DLCs. Because like once I beat the games and had done everything there was to do, I was like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Let's go home.
I get that. The DLCs have always been solid. They've been calling them DLCs is almost kind of disingenuous because they're more of expansion packs. Like what you would get like if you got Diablo 2 and then the expansion pack or Warcraft 3 and like the Frozen Throne. It's like that. It's a whole 10 to 15 hour new area, new everything for the most part. Maybe some reskinning, which good for them. Like good for them to add stuff like that. I hope it's a good DLC and I hope people like it. But they don't do the bullshit where it's like horse armor or costumes or dumb nonsense like that.
Mm. Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to it. It's won a ton of awards. I think it was basically the game of the year last year in almost every regard, except for wherever God of War could insert their staple in there. Next up on the news, we have the upcoming release of Resident Evil 4 Remake coming very soon, March 24th. I know you're looking forward to this. We just discussed it recently.
I wasn't originally. I was going to boycott it, but I saw the trailers. I'm going to keep it quick. I'm going to say I think they're trying really hard to make sure that all the areas and enemies and stuff are true to the original. I hope to God they don't do what they did with Resident Evil 3 Remake and remove a bunch of areas and just like condense shit into an even shorter game from a fairly short game to begin with.
Yeah.
The one gripe I have is voice acting. Nick Apostolides, I think his name is the voice actor for Leon, and he was the voice actor for Leon in Resident Evil 2 Remake. He's a great, fantastic voice actor, but Resident Evil 2 Leon is supposed to be 21 years old, and the game is set in 1998. Resident Evil 4 Leon is supposed to be 2004, 6 years later. I think and the whole point is like the maturation and growth. I don't think it does a good job to have the same voice actor you had him play a 21-year-old rookie cop to play him as a weathered federal agent for the government.
Yeah, maybe.
And
6 years isn't that long though. I could see it.
There's also, but a lot of the voices just don't fit very well. That's my biggest concern. Is that Krauser is the worst one. I've noticed like everyone was like, "What the fuck?" You went from this like really deep like, "Been a long time, comrade," to like just it sounds ridiculous. Salazar is still creepy, but I don't know. Sadler is kind of still the same, but not entirely. I guess again, we're gonna have to see if the voices don't work. That'll break a lot of people's immersion and ability to enjoy it. So that would be my one concern. Other than that, looks great. Looks like they're trying the best to make sure that all the areas and enemies you saw in the original are there and expanded upon, which I think is the best thing you can do with a remake, especially of one of the best games of all time.
Yeah. Well said. Moving on. Metroid Fusion will be available on March 9th for the Switch Online expansion pack coming up. it's worth noting this game was originally on the Game Boy. They used, I think, in 2002. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. This is another one of those moments where they're trying really hard to make the expansion pass worth it for Switch, and games like Metroid Fusion, which is, I think, fairly beloved by most people. I think is one of the ones. It's good to see games like that on it, and I think it increases the value of something that has been very much questioned in that sense.
Yeah,
whether it's worth paying for extra.
Do you want to take this next one for me?
Sure. Another piece of Metroid news that's kind of recent, and maybe you people out there have been also frustrated with this. Metroid Prime Remastered. It was announced on February 8th, and it was released digitally the same day during the Nintendo... I keep forgetting what the hell it is. Nintendo Direct, their news program. Mm-hmm. And then it was released physically on the 22nd? Yeah. It was released on the 22nd of February. And Metroid Prime originally came out in 2002 for the GameCube. It's the first-person Metroid game, and it's part of a trilogy.
Yep.
It was also released on the Wii as part of the Metroid Prime trilogy in 2009. And it's a very beloved game. It's a lot of people love it. One of the best games on GameCube for a lot of people. And the retail price for the remaster on Switch was $40, which is fairly reasonable, and a lot of people got really excited. However, due to how little they had of stock, where they had like 3 to 5 copies per store of the game, they very quickly ran out of stock, and you saw a lot of these copies for this game coming up on eBay and other shops for about $100.
So it's available digitally, but you have to go to the store to buy it?
It's available digitally, but for a lot of people who want a physical copy, which is a lot of people, myself included, there's a lot of scalpers who have bought up the stock and are now reselling it at inflated prices.
Gotcha.
And you suck if you do that. Don't do that.
The future is now, old man. Get digital or get busy dying.
It also... The sentiment is hopefully that they have more copies released and they basically create more so they don't have that stocking issue, and they are more than likely going to remaster 2 and 3, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
So
I could what's funny about this, I understand why you would want to potentially spend scalper prices for an original in the package game.
Well, the original's not made anymore, right? It's like
right. That's why it's valuable, right?
Yeah.
But why? I don't understand why anybody would pay a scalper price for a remaster physically. Like, I don't see what the value is. Why wouldn't you just want the original game? Like, that seems infinitely more collectible to me than a remaster. So anybody out there who's potentially thinking about buying scalper prices, period, probably shouldn't. But in this case especially, I would highly discourage doing so for a remaster title, because that's just not going to hold value at all.
And don't support scalpers. Fuck that. Mm-hmm. If they buy 5 copies of the game, fuck them. Like they don't deserve it. It hurts the game economy. It hurts collectors, because collectors actually collect for a reason, and they're not there to ruin the market. They're there to build a collection, whether it's sealed or for themselves or whatever. And game companies don't maybe make more copies of your game so this doesn't happen. Meet the demand of the fans, especially for a game that is one of the most popular GameCube games of all time. So,
yep, there you have it. All right, that's a great place to end the video game news, so we'll jump ahead to the comic book news. First up, Dilbert is dead.
Alas, poor Dilbert. I knew him very little.
Most people did. Following a racist rant video uploaded by the creator Scott Adams, the famous comic strip has been pulled from virtually all newspapers. I say fuck him, Dilbert sucked anyway. Any thoughts?
Well, Michael Scott tried to warn us about the dangers of office work, and clearly those warnings fell on deaf ears, which is why we now must acknowledge that Dilbert is no more and has died. A painful death, I'm sure. Rest in power, but not really. Fuck Scott Adams.
Wrong power. I don't think we want to rest in that power. Yeah.
Again, we go back to a theme here, similar to the actress from Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do this, especially if you have radical opinions.
Yeah. His in particular was like, hers is like stupid.
No,
but
I saw
not necessarily malicious. His was malicious.
His was
like
inciting some
black
shit.
people are gonna come and kill you, and like white people need to stay away from black people.
Yeah,
and, like super crazy shit. Like the dude absolutely, and apparently all these accounts are coming out from people who had to work under him and stuff, like about how bad he was and how happy they are. He's finally like exposed himself. Because before, if they said anything, that he would sue their nuts off, and
which is ironic too, because I don't know, he seems like a very shitty and disturbed individual from what I've read, and this is just one of those moments again where he had it, he had a thing he was making, he was doing some creative thing. It was just a silly fucking comic, but this is how it had to end. Like no one will give a fuck about Dilbert from years from now.
Nobody gave a fuck about Dilbert today.
Well.
Like,
if there was any sentiment towards giving a shit about this old comic strip in your newspaper that you maybe read when you were in school and bored, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
It briefly had a show too, but it was like 2 seasons and nobody watched it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
When I saw in the news that Dilbert has been pulled from newspapers, I was like, Dilbert is still in fucking newspapers? Also, there are fucking newspapers? I had no idea Dilbert was still going, and let alone that. And then the guy has to go. I mean, he's made millions on Dilbert, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then he has to go out of his way to have this YouTube podcast channel where he just wants to go on there and say, you gotta stay away from these black people, and I specifically moved into a neighborhood with a low black population, and that's the only way to handle these black people. And it's just, why are you doing this with your time? Why is this what's on your mind?
Imagine a black person who's a fan of Dilbert finding this out.
Well,
let's
get one thing right. There's never been a fan of Dilbert, so to imply that there are black fans of Dilbert on top of there already not being fans of Dilbert, it's probably a stretch.
I'm just saying, like, again, it goes to show, like, what's the goal here? To say some fucked up shit online that is more than likely going to get you fired, and 2, is going to piss off a lot of people, including your potentially tiny group of fans.
Yeah. It's dumb. It's stupid all around. Like, it's by all accounts, he sounds like he's a piece of shit, so good riddance. Bye, Felicia. All right, next up on the news, this will be our final news topic for today. The United States Copyright Office has officially ruled that the AI-generated art in the comic Zarya of Dawn is not owned by the creator of the comic. Creator Chris Castanova wrote the story and used the text-to-image engine Midjourney to create the book. It's worth noting the USCO ruling also means that the AI engine creator could not copyright the material as well. So neither the engine creator nor the person who created the comic book owns the artwork for the book. So it's free use. Anybody can copy, paste, whatever. But the materials in the comic, like the story and the characters, I guess technically, although the images of the characters is still free use. It's a very convoluted situation, and we are very fast approaching a time with AI devices like Midjourney, like ChatGPT, where the delineation between ownership of a material, when you use any kind of AI assistant in the process, is up for grabs. And it's going to make for some very crazy future court battles, I imagine. So I'm not sure how you guys feel about this issue, if you have any thoughts or opinions on the matter.
I mean, I guess if you're a creative type, it's better to be a writer at the current state of affairs rather than a visual artist, because clearly if you draw or paint or create any visual beauty that you hope to ever make any kind of profit from, you're fucked. Is how I interpret that ruling, at least as it stands now. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a major policy issue in our society moving forward. I mean, the capabilities of AI to inject itself into creative spaces is just already so beyond what any of us could have imagined even 2 years ago. And now they can just paint anything, draw anything, create any image they want, write any story they want, write research papers. I mean, the whole endeavor of human creativity is actually under some sort of threat if you think about it long term, if this is where we are now from being nowhere near this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Imagine 10 years from now or 20 years from now how advanced this will continue to get. I mean, it's not a good time to be an artist trying to make a living.
Definitely not. It never was easy. Now it's really not easy.
What kind of fucking art are you making where you're randomly generating it using an AI?
Well, I think it's just the general principle is like, hey, you have this idea in your head, but you're independent. You don't have the money to pay a talented artist to spend a month creating each title. I mean, it's expensive labor and it's really time-consuming labor. And hey, you have this tool available to you that's free to use, and you can generate with just your descriptions what you envision in your head using this AI tool. So I get the application. I mean, it makes creating art way more simple than it's ever been in the past. As a collective piece, you know, she's clearly a writer, has no problem writing this creative story of unique origin, but just didn't have the means to pay an artist on her own, and probably couldn't get picked up by a major comic label for this, you know, new franchise. You know, it's not some established thing that you know you're going to make a bunch of money on. So I get from the author's perspective why they would do this and use this method. And, you know, she's not the only one doing it. There's several others that are dealing with the same thing and fighting in court right now. And this will probably end a lot of those cases because the U.S. Copyright Office is usually the end-all be-all of copyright law internationally, really.
I guess my question is, what makes it why is it nobody's property if it's AI generated? Is it because it's easier? Like, you can, if I make a triangle in Photoshop as part of my art, is the triangle free use for everybody because it's a default triangle? Is, if an AI generates a color correction filter over art I put or a picture I put, is it like, where's that line of how much work has to be done by what to where it's no longer your work because a computer is doing so much of it?
And it's even more gray in this situation because the art is not just randomly being generated by the AI. It's being very thoughtfully talked to and told what to create based on the author's description. This is a text to image processing, like cyber brain, that takes exactly what you're describing and attempts its best interpretation of it and renders it for you. So technically, the idea, if we're saying that the copyright of art is copyright of ideas, technically the idea is still hers. So from her perspective and from her lawyer's perspective, I'm sure they probably made this argument, the idea is still hers. So the copyright of the idea should still belong to her, despite her using this advanced tool to generate it.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean,
It's
ultimately,
intellectual
you're
property.
just putting inputs. I
Yeah.
mean, you're feeding inputs into a tool, which is then producing a visual output, like you were saying. Like,
But
that,
the intellectual property of what you're putting in is hers by definition. When you come up with an idea, that idea is like yours. Like,
Yeah, that's
whether
what
it's
you
in
would
business
argue,
or
right?
art.
Right, yeah.
So
And then on the other hand, there's...
so they're saying that the author can't copyright the art
Yep.
because
Correct.
she used the AI image generator.
She can still own the name, she can still own the story and all that stuff and the characters, but she can't own
that
the
doesn't make any
artwork.
fucking sense though, because if it's tool assist, everything is fucking tool assisted. Nobody is like sitting there writing every image by hand like they used to back in the 50s or 30s or whatever. So where is that line? Like, because it's sophisticated enough? Like, what about 3D rendering? If I put something in Blender and generate a physics-based object, well, it did all the processing of the water hitting the ball or whatever, so it's not yours. Like, what?
Yeah. And then it goes to, like, you know, an even more advanced level if the company that owns the AI decides that they want to claim it for themselves. Because on their hand, you know, there's a lot of blog websites, video websites that once you upload to their website, they own that. Like, even though you created it and it's your profile, they own that. A lot of people left DeviantArt for that reason, because DeviantArt was selling people's artworks to AI companies specifically so they could train AI to do this. to draw art. And so a bunch of artists suddenly like started yanking their stuff off of DeviantArt because they realized, oh, I don't own these rights on DeviantArt, and like anybody can copy and paste and use these, with DeviantArt's permission, including algorithms, which is even more crazy because now you're not just protecting your property from human beings, you're protecting it from internet thieves that are a thinking algorithm that just want to generate for other people in your style. So it gets to crazy meta levels.
Do you think that a reason for this court outcome is the fact that maybe a lot of the people on the jury or the court, whatever, don't understand the extent of the technology?
I'm certain of it. Yeah.
It might be just a bunch of older people who just, this is something like they can't even wrap their brain around.
Think about the people that probably work at a copyright office. Like nobody grows up dreaming of becoming a copyright clerk, right? Or officiant. Like that's something you just kind of fall into like throughout life, and it's probably comprised, not that older people can't be tech savvy, but it's probably comprised of older generations. This is crazy to us as 30 and 20-year-olds. It's even crazier to somebody who remembers a significant period of their adult life being before the internet was a big thing, before cell phones, before all the stuff. Like we had childhoods that were comprised of those things, but like these people spent decades of their life in an era where none of this was even conceivable. And now it's happening way faster than anybody can handle. I mean, it was like overnight that GPT became an overnight sensation only a month and a half. And then like all of these AI art apps started popping up right behind it, right on the heels. And there's always been some AI tools out there that people have employed, but they've always been a little janky and not quite useful. Well, now we cross that threshold. Now they're actually practical and useful, and most of them are free or very cheap. So at what point do you draw the line? Where do you say, okay, this is now owned by something or somebody? And at what point do you say, this is too much of everybody, so we're going to say it's free reign, free use. Anybody could have generated this with the specific parameters, right?
Well, because if I really feel like the conversation in court is like, well, did you draw this? Well, no, then it's not yours. Like, I think that's kind of like the overarching, like, did you make this?
Yeah.
Did you pay someone else to make it?
But in that perspective, the company would own it, right? The company who made the AI, but they didn't rule that either.
Yeah, because then whoever makes Photoshop owns everything, because everyone uses Photoshop.
Right.
I think the dumb aspect of this too is the fact that because you can't I understand making the argument of, well, if anybody can just generate some shit with some text, then like what the fuck, right? But then it's like, well, if anybody can make music with Fruity Loops, well, if anybody can make art with Photoshop, well, if anybody, like, it becomes if your argument is it's easy, therefore it's not yours, or a digital camera is easier to record in than having to fucking crank a analog, whatever.
Yeah.
Then what the fuck? Any new technological advancements immediately denotes lack of involvement or ownership just because it's...
Yeah. Well, just to give you kind of a funny example of this, when I was in the Army, I was a sniper, and we were just starting to get into the realm of like automated scopes. Like scopes that you use a laser rangefinder on. The scope has a kestrel built into it, basically, so it knows the wind, at least at your location. It knows the temperature. You plug in your GPS coordinates, so you don't have to worry about the Coriolis effect over long distances. Like, this is all stuff you had to manually calculate and figure out when I was being trained. And then suddenly this high-tech stuff started making appearance and being tested, and now it's in full use in combat. Like, the stuff's out there. Like, do you say the person is no longer a competent sniper because they can engage their target much faster than they ever could when they were doing it manually? I don't know. I mean, it made them a much more effective sniper, right? So it's weird. We're getting into a weird space, and I think a lot of automation in general is going to be hitting us a lot quicker than we think. And ChatGPT, for example, was originally meant to just be a coding tool that would just basically complete really simple code creations for like basic tasks. Like, hey, we need to have this matrix do A, B, and C, and like we know we can do it ourselves, but it's going to take us, a long time to like actually sit down and crank it out. Whereas I can just tell this AI what to create and it'll generate the code for me. That's what it was meant to do originally. And so you've already reduced the functionality of entry-level coders, entry-level artists, entry-level authors, entry-level comedians. Like everything entry-level is about to be completely eliminated by AI tools in the very close future. And like we already saw this, with the Rust Belt and everything going overseas and becoming automated with robots and everything else. We're getting to that next step where now not only do we have the mechanical automation, but we have the mental automation with an AI tool.
Well, this ruling, has the potential to exacerbate that problem too, because already some artists lost work when this author used the tool to create her art, right? Because now she didn't have to hire someone that has that ability to produce art for the book.
Right.
But now with this ruling, she also can copyright it, which means now if somebody else wants to make a book, they can just pull her art as much as they want. And the more of this is created, the more they'll have to pull from.
Yep.
And this will just create a ripple effect where now nobody has to pay an artist for anything.
Yeah.
Because they can either generate it themselves or pull whatever they want that's already been generated for their own purposes. So,
right.
This ruling, copyright law is meant to protect creators. And ruling it this way is going to exacerbate the problem of stripping creators of their ability to create.
Yeah. And copyright law has been fucked for so long. Like copyright in its original form was only supposed to last a few decades. And then you were done. Like everything was free access after that point. Like Winnie the Pooh just became public domain very recently. The character is over 100 years old. That's not what copyright was ever supposed to do, but every time a big company realized their copyright was about to be fucked, they would do something to get an extension or get a delay.
Make a shitty movie,
yeah. And then they started making new laws with a lot of lobbying that said, all right, as long as you do A, B, and C as frequently as A, B, and C, you get to retain the rights and do whatever. So there's a lot of stuff out there that is just barely on a thin string of copyright law, the extensions of the extensions of the extensions based from heavy lobbying. Like now all of that's going to be redundant with anything newly created because a lot of people are going to be using these AI tools to either enhance or just outright create their art. We're talking about visual art right here, but it could be any art. It could be music, like you said, with Fruity Loops, or something like that.
Like imagine it. Transpose this into any other situation or industry. Imagine a kid makes a song in GarageBand, and they're like, "It's not yours, it's Apple because they made GarageBand." Imagine technology-wise, like in the '90s, some kid records himself. I say kid, but like a college student makes a film, right? But it's on digital, and he puts that on his computer. Like that doesn't count as a copyright movie because it's not analog, and you didn't transpose it to film and do it yourself. What the fuck? Like, where is that line? Like,
yeah, it's tough. I honestly, this one, you're completely right. So you would think the artist would still be the ultimate owner of these things, but when
it's a tool, though. That's my
when
point.
You weren't physically the one that generated it. When we get to that stage where it's not even your prompts describing everything anymore, and we're fast approaching it. Like it's probably already possible. How do you delineate? It's going to be tough. I don't envy any of the lawyers and judges that are going to have to make these rulings in the very near future. Because it's so complex. And I'm telling you, like these big companies that rely on concept artists, whether it's for movies, television, video games, etc., there's already AI tools that can create like very basic video games on its own with basic prompts. Like this stuff's coming. And a lot of people are going to be replaced in the industry. And I think what's ultimately going to happen is everything's going to become somewhat samey. Because all of these AI tools are using largely the same pool of data, which is human history, and it won't be necessarily capable of creating something really uniquely brand new. Like try creating a new word for something, and then just loosely trying to describe it to an AI machine that only knows the history of said environment things. Like you're gonna have a really hard time coming up with something brand new.
I think do you think it's also going to be kind of what CGI was in the 90s and early 2000s, where everyone kind of had the same shit? Where it was very like, it was this new concept, right? We can transpose 3D models, and they looked sometimes kind of cool if you masked it right with the right lighting, but most of the time pretty artificial. And a lot of it was the same kind of washed out, digitized, fuzzy shit. But it was like, hey, we don't actually have to have a person in a suit. We can post edit. I think that. Do you think it's going to be like that too?
I think we're already there. I think we're in that stage right now. I think we don't realize it just yet. I think it's happening so quickly and so exponentially. We don't realize what's happening to us and what's happening around us. But yes, 100%. I think you're right. I think we're in those early stages right now. And it's these things come faster and faster and faster because it's all collective, right? So it's not going to be like the Industrial Revolution where it happened over the course of 30, 40 years. It's going to be very sudden. It's not, the internet boom, like with the .com boom and all that stuff. Like that stuff took like a decade to develop and then crash and come back again. Like this is going to be far faster. I guarantee you this will be almost commonplace in probably 2 years. I'm almost certain of it.
They better figure out a way to make it more appealing to storytellers and creative types, because this is the future of stories and creativity, fuck that.
Yeah, I honestly think the only way that this reverses course is if these big wealthy companies that realizes what's on the horizon and how it's not going to be able to protect its copyrights for any future projects they make because they're going to be given two choices. Either you use these tools and keep up with the market, or you become redundant and outdated and, retain your rights for whatever handful of things you can put out. Because this stuff's going to churn out far faster and far more polished than anything they'll create. And they'll, think about the cost of video games right now. You spend hundreds of millions of dollars having development cycles of 5, 6, 7 years. When you use an AI tool or something that can do it in 1 year with a handful of skilled inputters.
I have an alternative good ending projection.
Oh, okay.
So this is the future of pushing the envelope in technology. This is like the newest, coolest, craziest, fastest shit we've ever invented, or the byproduct of our inventions, however you want to think of it.
Yeah.
I think this will spur a lot of people to going back, and what kind of happening right now still, where a lot of people are trying to like demake things. You get a lot of like demakes, like PS1 versions of a PS5 game or some shit like that.
Yeah.
I think this would be really cool if a byproduct of this happening would be a explosion in people bringing back retro ways of doing things, whether that's using old cameras to record, hand drawing comics, art, and everything. Yeah. It will be a lot of more work than this. Right. Yeah. The whole point is that this optimizes the time. But if this motivates a counter, like almost like counter anti-movement of a lot of creators and people to just say, fuck it, we're going to go back and do things the old-fashioned way because this is stupid and we don't like where this is going and you're not on our side. We're just going to do it complete. Like it's going to be a revitalization. If that happens, I think that would be hilarious and cool and awesome, because you basically have an arms race between the tried and true and the new and like strange and unknown.
I think my counter to that would be, just to play devil's advocate.
Oh, go for it.
We've always had that. Like there's always directors who want to go back and use old film. Like Tarantino did that. Spielberg did that. Who recently did that? I can't remember his name. Anyway, it's commonplace even now. Like people are still making 8-bit and 16-bit video games their own way, even though we have these amazing rendering technologies where you can make amazing 3D models and huge 200-hour fantasy, RPG open worlds and blah blah blah. But there's still people making pixel art. Like that stuff's always going to exist. There's always going to be the counterculture fringe, but I think it's just inevitable. I think the stuff's been coming for a long time. Anybody who's heard people talk about technology has talked about it. Elon Musk famously at his recent presser for stockholders for Tesla was saying, somebody brought up what is the thing in the field that really scares you, or that you think Tesla has had some involvement in, and he said AI. I think we've done a lot to help progress AI for our self-driving vehicles and blah blah blah. It's like, but I think AI is the one thing I find truly terrifying and like an unbounded threat to humanity, because right now there's no real laws restricting AI significantly, or the development of AI and what you limit its potential to be. And I think that's common with any new technology. You look at any new technology, and there's always people screaming from the rooftops, how this is going to upend humanity and how it's going to destroy our morals and destroy our infrastructure, whatever else, whatever it may be. Think about like the original founding of motor cars. Like, everybody's like, oh, right now we're grounded with nature and we take care of these animals and have these great companions and this great moral family value around the care and sustainment of horses in our carriages and blah, blah, blah. And if we go to these noisy, polluting, cars, like, it's going to ruin the world and people are going to be hitting each other and running each other over and blah, blah, blah. And some of that came true. They were right. But time marches on. And now
somehow we're all kind of okay still, somewhat.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Exactly. So if you want to go the optimistic route, I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. I think it's just going to become commonplace. It's scary right now because we know what life could potentially become, and we know what life was without it. But I think inevitably it's going to happen whether we like it or not. It's just how we choose to adapt to it ourselves that will create our ultimate experience with it.
I agree 100% with being able to adapt. Like, you don't have to like this shit. If you think it's weird and off-putting, that's one thing. But, like, the worst thing you can do is become nihilistic and depressed by the fact that the world is changing. The creative process has more tools that are more... This is very different from just a program that you can click and it will, like, shade in something for you. But that was very different from a piece of paper and a canvas and pens and pens. So...
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think it was like a Pixar short or something like that. It was some kind of digital animation short where this guy is working at a factory and he's proud of his factory job. And one day he sees people bringing in those big the machines that, automate a lot of the car manufacturing process. And he's looking at it, he's a little worried, but he keeps doing his job. And then he gets a layoff notice, and like they go to the down part of the little short where he's kind of reminiscing on the good old days, and he's sad he lost his job. He's looking at bills and stuff, and then somebody calls him back in, and it basically ends with him like working on the robot and like repairing the robot, and that's his new job, and like it's even better than what he was doing before, and like So there's some truth to that. I mean, I'm not saying it's all going to be happy. There's going to be people that get left in the dust. There's going to be people that fight it as hard as they can and just fight a losing battle against the tide. It's going to be a mixed bag. But I think overall it will be a good thing. I think the fact that despite this ruling being an issue for the artists, and I do think that's a genuine issue for the artists, I think it's just going to make the artists have to be more creative with how they monetize their products, whether it's something like Patreon where you have contribution from fans to sustain yourself, or, hey, just because this AI created this art that's technically free to use, that doesn't mean you can make it available for everybody to just use. Like, make it so like some kind of paywall protection has to be used in order to read it or use it or whatever. Make sure you can't screenshot it, whatever. Or maybe go back to a physical medium where they have to physically own it to enjoy the comic. Like, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And then no matter who tried to copyright it and like steal your art, like they would have to do the whole process of scanning a physical page, and like that's always problematic, and the color's never quite right. Like there are ways around this, and I think there are ways to produce this in the future. And ultimately, I think we all need universal basic income. Andrew Yang, go ahead and run for the presidency again. Thank you. And that's where I'm going to end my rant. All right.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add other than, I think there is the potential for a pendulum swing. I think ultimately these businesses have to answer to consumers, which is probably the only thing that can kind of even things out a little bit and pull us back from the brink a little bit. I mean, just being a Star Wars fan, we've seen this in the Star Wars franchise where they went so towards CGI, like especially George Lucas going back and reinserting CGI into the original movies. I mean, he just became a caricature of Hollywood's ridiculous affinity for CGI. And I think that the fan push for less CGI and more practical effects, like when the movies were first made, really had an impact, because now we see on new products that are being put out in the Star Wars franchise, like Andor, like The Mandalorian, we're seeing more and more practical effects and less CGI.
Yeah.
So I think that they've kind of found a happy medium, and a lot of that was the pendulum swung till everything's CGI, and then it's kind of swung back. So I have hope that there is the potential for that pendulum swing back to a better balance than this.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think that's a good place to end the news. As always, we got to give out our prestigious, nay, life-changing award of Comic Cover of the Week. This week we have a really cool one. This one going to DC Comics, The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing, number 6. This one is the Kendrick Kunka, I apologize if I mispronounced that, Lim cover. Kendrick Lim has created this awesome kind of multi-headed, very insane Joker cover, brightly colored, brightly animated, really, really cool. Basically features this almost demonic multi-headed beast of a Joker holding one of his classic Joker cards with the classic purple and green combinations. I mean, it's horrifying, but it definitely catches the eye and looks awesome. It will definitely look great on the wall. I don't know if any of you watching have noticed yet, but I've started adding not only some classic collections of mine and our bombshell covers, but I got some of our covers of the week starting to go up, and you'll see a lot more of those. I've tried to buy every comic cover of the week to support those artists as they come in, and of course supporting the local comic book shops. Please support your local comic book shops. And you should see this one very soon, because I love it. I think it looks awesome.
I think it's very, what's the term? Not surreal. There's a term for it. Wow, I literally had it on the tip of my tongue. It's a good cover. That's what I got.
Yeah. I mean, it totally embodies like the concept of the Joker's madness, right? Like he doesn't
surrealist horror. I think that's what I was thinking of.
Sure, yeah. It has that kind of phantom aspect of he's always making up these different origins and coming up with different personas, but in the end, are we even sure that he knows what the actual answer is? And you even look at like the Joker movie, which I talk about how I like it vague. Well, that one basically spells out his origin more or less, but even he is kind of in this weird fantasy where you're not quite sure what happened. You know what he thinks happened. He thinks that Thomas Wayne is his dad. He thinks that he probably did something horrible to the girl in the apartment building, but you don't really quite know, because he's had this whole fantasy that he was in love with this woman, and turns out she didn't even know he existed really, outside of that one elevator interaction. So I think this artwork just perfectly captures who the Joker is. Really love it. Really creative idea. Shout out once again to Kendrick Lim for his amazing work on this variant cover for the Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing, number 6. Now, as always, if you want to check whether the contents matched the drapes, let's read the description for you. The Joker's enjoying the sunny, warm weather of Los Angeles so much he's decided to stay and get involved in local politics. Kate Spencer's fists might have something to say about that, though. Sounds horrible.
Yeah, I was gonna say the art is so interesting, and
yeah,
is this like a political cartoon? And the Joker.
Yeah. I guess we'll find out.
That is definitely the worst city council ad I've ever seen. Actually, now that I think about it, in retrospect,
vote for mayor.
Yeah. Make Los Angeles great again.
That actually does look like LA City Council, though. So
stop. All right, that's a great place to end it. Thank you all for watching and listening. We really love you. As always, check out our social media at facebook.com/HitTheBooks, Twitter at HTBVids. You can find us on YouTube, of course, Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, any other podcast services of your choice. If there's any out there that you want us to be on, just reach out to our email or hit us up on Twitter. Let us know. I'll be happy to add us onto those services if possible. Hopefully we will see Emery and Nick One return in the near future. So look forward to that. As always, check out those Natural Ones, I believe on Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on their YouTube channel. Of course, links in the description if you need it. And as always, give us some feedback. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of. Let us know if you have any ideas for the shows or any topics you'd like us to discuss on the show. We'd love to hear back from you. All right. I think that wraps everything up. Anything you guys want to put out there in the world?
Nothing for me, but just one more time, please watch Andor. Everyone, please. I beg of you. It's so good.
I mean, it's based off my favorite Star Wars movie, so I need to watch it.
And it's better than your favorite Star Wars movie.
How dare you?
I'm just saying.
This can't be possible.
It's true.
Oh, my God. All right. You, Nick?
Try not to be a douchebag, as we've learned from some of the news.
Yeah, maybe stay off social media. I know we just told you to come and contact us on social media, but we got a YouTube channel with comments. Maybe avoid social media for a bit. Take a break.
Try to be
Do
awesome
an Aaron
person.
Rodgers. Go have a dark session without any technology for a few days.
And try not to start any sentences with, the thing about black people is...
Yeah, that never
if
ends
Scott
well.
Adams has taught us anything.
That never ends well. Don't do it. If you got any opinions about the Jews, other than they're great, wonderful people, maybe keep that to yourself. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you both. You both saved me in a big spot with filling some guest chairs for me. So I really appreciate you guys both making the trip to come over and record with me. Hopefully you like the new digs. It'll be even more improved. Hopefully a week from now. We'll see how time comes about for me. But I am anticipating after I get the taxes done, we'll be looking pretty nice. So thank you all for watching, listening one more time. And we'll see you next week.
Don't forget to scream 6 times.
Lightning is just boring.
I fucking hated 13.
Yeah, I didn't finish it. I got so bored. I couldn't finish it. Oh, I tried so hard to care about those characters, and I just couldn't.